G'day, mate. 40 here. Welcome to the show. You're in the no fap zone. So I thought I'd start off tackling some thoughts by my friend Godward podcast. So it's more fun to wrestle with the thoughts of a friend than to just launch out into any old topics. So I'm going to go into a commentary on Godward podcast, but let's warm up with a little red bar here.
That's what's really happening here. This is how people, and these are adults. These are people that are supposed to be intellectuals. Gad Sad. He's got 100 degrees. And they're like, Gad, what do you think about Joe Rogan? Did you see Rogan?
It's funny how nobody really discusses these guys' ideas anymore.
No, it's all about... This is what I mean.
Oh my God, and we have to play that clip of Lex and Warts talking about Joe
Yes,
Rogan too.
Lex and
Okay,
Warts.
we have so much stuff to do today.
I know, we have. I got to get through
Yes,
it.
go.
But first...
Because I need to play the big mic stuff. I
But
need
first,
to play so
every
much stuff.
reaction in the crowd.
I'm being a producer today.
Okay, watch
Speed her
this.
up.
Watch this.
And he's a real nice guy. I've met him in person a couple times. He's really short, and you don't see it coming. Luke, you don't see it coming. He's got to be like.
This is what it sounds like. For some reason, $100 million. Spotify contracts. MMA respect. Cigars. Nope, the audio's all messed up. So I don't know if it's Brian Redband or that sick fuck Jamie who I like to drag out, put him through a ball return at a bowling alley. He'd fit, too, with the thinness of his skull. Right through that ball return and into the bumpers. But who's doing the audio? It sounds awful. Listen to this.
Okay, so Red Bar, not a big fan of Joe Rogan, but let me run through my friend Godward. Okay, so he retweets, people are mad about this. After months of protests and a year of pandemic, Lushenko held a ball for youths last night in Minsk. Unreal. Okay, so 350,000 Americans have died from the pandemic, and tens of thousands of people have died from the pandemic in Russia. Now, it does mainly kill people over 70 years of age, but on the other hand, it has caused many younger people to get sick. There have been some health complications. I don't know about why people should get mad about this, but what it could do is promote the spread of a virus that has upended millions of lives. So I could understand why people would be concerned. What I don't understand is why would you be surprised that people would be concerned about the passing on of COVID, unless you want to take the attitude that COVID is just a hoax, right? It's killed over 1 million people, but it's just a hoax. That makes no sense to me. All right, Godward retweets Harold Bloom. Gnosis is a mode of knowing, seems to me as it did to Emerson. Finally, the knowing of what is oldest and so earliest in oneself, and so the true counter force to a sense of having a right. But I do have an opinion on this. Not having a YouTube channel where you say what you think and allowing comments is a way of enabling your own delusion. You can convince yourself you know what you're talking about without entering the arena. Say no to that security blanket. Try yourself out. So not having a YouTube channel where you say what you think and allowing comments is a way of enabling your own delusions. That's interesting. So maybe I think there is truth to that, but also maybe you know enough and you are undiluted enough to know that you don't really want to make public your thoughts. Now, if you conceive of yourself as a public intellectual, then you'd want to find arenas for sharing your views with the world. But I like this comment. You can convince you know what you're talking about without entering the arena. Say no to that security blanket. Try yourself out. So definitely some people should try themselves out. There's a downside, however. you can absolutely blow up your life. Many people are irresponsible. So Godwin says, right, keep it small and sort of invisible. Yeah, but there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees what the results could be. There are no guarantees that once you start making things public that you'll be able to keep yourself private, right? It doesn't really work that way. A lot of people thought, oh, I'll just appear in a few porn films and nobody will know. But there are big downsides to going public, particularly with hot button opinions. So you can try to keep it small and you can try to keep it sort of invisible, but you don't control that 100%. Right? Things can spin out of control, as Godwood Podcasts understands. Godwood says, I genuinely don't understand people who don't start a YouTube show or a podcast like you almost have to. Yes, be anonymous. Modulate your voice. Don't show your face. Avoid controversial topics. But beyond that, what are you doing? Why not? Well, it can spin out of control. You may think that you're not saying anything controversial, but you may well. Your public self may be incredibly unlikable. People may react and want to hurt you. It's a challenge to your well-being to start a YouTube show or a podcast, right? I would say most people don't have the stuff to handle it. Most people don't have the good judgment. Here's what happens when you go online and start operating online. You immediately become much more impulsive. So you make buying decisions. You say and do all sorts of things that you would not do in real life, because going online develops impulsivity. I mean, I don't know why Godwood, who suffered so much damage from going online, would be urging people to just go online. I kind of like it, because there are people who need to become more positively visible, but unless you have your act together, don't do it. And unless you're aware of the downsides, don't do it. So what happens when you go online is you immediately become more impulsive. You immediately become more self-centered. You immediately become more grandiose. Going online and sharing your opinions immediately makes you feel that you have expertise and grandeur that you don't, right? It leads to narcissism, which is the chasing of admiration. So a lot of people with some narcissistic tendencies, narcissism did not play a major role in their life until they got online, and then their e-personality took over. So for a lot of people, starting a YouTube channel or even a social media presence is a really bad idea. A lot of people are better off having no social media. There are people I encounter in real life. You Google them, virtually nothing shows up, right? There are very solid advantages to that. And so you can try to be anonymous. You can try to modulate your voice. You can try not to show your face. You can avoid controversial topic. And the thing can still spin out of control. There are far more possible downsides when you go public with these things than when you don't. So also what happens when you go online is that it will tend to make you more morbid. You will share things online that you would not share in real life. Ah, Laponius. Okay, Charles, I think I can say welcome back. You can converse with a network of private thinkers which challenge your views. Right, so use good judgment. Perhaps just an online group where you have knowledge of who's in your group. All right, what's going on with the affirmative right? A Bridgerton Too Far by Colin Liddell. Last Christmas, writes Colin, I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll save it for someone special. Last Christmas and the one before that, it all seemed to be about how many blacks were in Christmas ads. This Christmas, I've been seeing a lot of social media chatter about Bridgerton, a Netflix series about Regency England that inserts incongruous black characters into the period. So England 1811 to 1820. So Chandra, the producer, everything she makes is low IQ and stupid. Is it Chandra Rhimes? right? This American TV producer, she makes everything for about the 92 IQ crowd. I mean, all her stuff is dumb. Grey's Anatomy, Private Practice, Scandal. Like, I tried to watch them. They're just so stupid. And this one's pretty stupid too. Right, Colin Liddell writes, in the same way that Hamilton the musical cultural outpourings from America. But I know enough about Bridgerton to know what's going on. Plus, I know enough about human psychology and the nationalist right to know what's going on. And to know how crappy their critique of Christmas ads in Bridgerton is. Essentially, the alt-right position here is one of emotional butthurt over the sacred cultural artifacts of their race, such as Sainsbury ads and empowered women costume dramas being tainted and blacked by the liberal scum of a certain ethnicity who are literally rubbing their faces in it, etc., etc. The term cultural appropriation crops up. It sounds like this. Yes, we're butter. Yes, our culture is being erased because we're weak. Yes, they control everything while we control nothing. Yes, our faces are being rubbed in feces. And because we are weak, there is nothing we can do about it except to say, damn, damn, damn. There. That is most of what I'm hearing from the retarded, Jew-obsessed, meta-politically impotent rump alt-right, and much else of the nationalist and dissident right. Is that the kind of movement you want to be a part of? Of course not. I can still remember when the old alt-right was still capable of delivering up potent and deeply disturbing critiques of the globo-homo order, instead of just, look how triggered and offended I am, grift, grift. So what is the correct response to this Bridgerton sort of thing? Well, many years ago, I coined the phrase cultural welfareism. The point here is that blacks are being put into white roles because they, sadly, if you choose to be empathetic, suffer from extreme cultural poverty. Implicit whites, Europeans, and British should have theirs. The alternative is to go along with these historically inaccurate globo-homo racial mashups that alienate everyone and trigger something I called sub-racism. So sub-racism, the return of the repressed. The great irony is that the only truly race-blind people likely to exist are those who live in racially homogeneous societies where they do not come into contact with other races. This is a great point. But the racial diversity that is imposed in Western cosmopolitan society means that race is never forgotten. It is all around us all the time. It is in the very air we breathe. But we are taught to breathe silently and keep a secret that everybody knows. We must ignore the elephant in the room, and even repress our perception of it until the elephant becomes invisible. This is the climate of sub-racism. But like so much in modern society, the existence of something as big as sub-racism also presents many opportunities for the entrepreneurial or attention-hungry. Playing to people's sub-racism is an instant ticket to get noticed, to sell something, to get a message across, or to make a career. What we're seeing here with all these Black Christmas ads and Black overrepresentation on TV shows is essentially a cheap psychological trick to instill a hint of fear, discomfort, or dissonance into otherwise heartwarming supermarket ads and garish and shallow costume dramas to trigger attention and a bastardized form of interest. Mediocre content in an age of sensory overload like our own needs to struggle, scratch, and bite the psyche of the average person to get itself noticed. The most effective way to do that is the incongruous black man. Advertisers know this, and so do Netflix producers. This is really good stuff. Rather than crying about more cultural appropriation, a more effective way to critique this phenomenon is to explain that the so-called inclusion and black empowerment is essentially just an attempt to trigger mild racial shock based on out-group discomfort, the photographic negative of in-group preference. This is the spice they are cooking with. This is the fire that they are playing with. This is the cricket bat that they are swinging. With this line of attack, you stand a chance of getting through to leftists, liberals, and normies and unnerving them instead of allowing them to laugh at how feeble and butthurt you are that the supposed precious purity of your cultural icons has been sullied, something which becomes even more ludicrous if you happen to look like one of these fine alt-right specimens. So let's look at some of the visuals here in this Colin Liddell article. A Bridgerton too far. Right. These are the cultural purists who are most upset by blacks in Netflix costume dramas. Bridgerton is a particularly good example with which to make these points and others because unlike the musical Hamilton, which incongruously inserted blacks into the most noble and elevated period of American history, Bridgerton has revealed its inherent and unavoidable left-wing racism of low expectations by incongruously inserting blacks into one of the worst periods of British history. All right, let's have a look at some of Colin's commentary here from a few years ago.
Hello, this is Colin Liddell, the chief editor of Alternative Right, and this is the Short Pod, a short 5 to 10 minute long podcast. And today is Monday, the 5th of February, 2018. Now, look at the picture that accompanies this podcast. It shows 6 pictures taken from the BBC. 4 of them show roles in historical dramas, one of them shows an extra from Doctor Who, and another is an illustration used on the BBC website. Now, all of them show blacks in roles that one would expect whites to play. For example, the BBC series The Hollow Crown, which focuses on the life of Margaret of Anjou, shows that French princess played by a mulatto actress. Whereas Friar Tuck, Guinevere, semi-legendary figures from British folklore, are also depicted as black, and Achilles, the Greek legendary figure, is also played by a black actor. What does this represent? Now, the conventional explanation is that it shows anti-white bias. It shows the BBC pushing an agenda of racial replacement. It shows a kind of colonization of our culture, etc., etc., etc. But another way of looking at it is that this is actually evidence of the BBC being racist against black people, in that while they are prepared to be inclusive and representative of blacks in Britain by giving them acting roles, they are much less willing to be inclusive and representative of blacks by actually focusing on authentic black culture and history. So instead of making dramas about black history, for example, you could probably go and film something about Zulus or about some kingdom that might have existed in the depths of Africa, they're forced to press gang all these black actors and actresses into white roles, thus highlighting their extreme prejudice against black content. Now, they have a black man playing Achilles. That's because, on the one hand, they feel that they have to be inclusive to black actors to a certain extent, because blacks make up around 3% of the British population. But on the other hand, they don't want to focus on black mythological heroes. Likewise, Margaret of Anjou. This is a French princess, being played by what looks like a mulatto actress. Instead of that, why don't they just make a program about mulatto people? There must be some book or novel or piece of history that involves mulatto people. So what the BBC is saying here is that blacks and mulattoes have no history that is worth turning into programs. Friar Tuck is another example. This is, of course, the legend of Robin Hood, which is set in, I believe it's 12th or 13th century England. Instead of forcing black actors into these unnatural roles of playing medieval white monks or legendary Greek heroes or Queen Guinevere, instead of doing that, they could then provide those wonderful black actors with content that reflects their own identity. So they could find black novels, black history, and they could make programs about that. Now, the fact that they don't do that is probably because of 2 reasons. First of all, they know that probably nobody would actually have any interest in black legends, black history, and black myths, except for Britain's 3% of black people, but even that's a bit of a stretch. The other reason is that the creative types at the BBC, the writers, the directors, the producers, these people, you will find, if you looked at them, that they are overwhelmingly white, possibly disproportionately gay and Jewish, but nevertheless white. And those creative types would be very, very reluctant, if not incapable, of creating content that would be suitable for black actors. So that would be very, very difficult for them. So the easy option in this case, to tick the diversity and inclusivity box, is to press gang these unfortunate, unlucky black actors and actresses into unnatural and unsuitable white roles. So this is overwhelming evidence of a very, very entrenched colonial attitude at the BBC, very, very entrenched racist sensibility that reveals almost zero respect for black culture. And all they want are a few black bodies, a few black faces on the package to tick the diversity box and serve as a fake multicultural label on a product that is inherently white in almost every way. Shame on the BBC.
Okay, so Jonathan Pollard has served his 30-year sentence, and here he is getting off the plane in Israel and getting greeted by the Prime Minister Netanyahu. So on the one hand, you would think, for shame, Jonathan Pollard may well have stolen many of America's most valuable secrets, given them to Israel, which then traded them perhaps to the Soviet Union. This is what was alleged in the New Yorker, that many of America's most valuable secrets were stolen by Jonathan Pollard, given to Israel. Israel then traded them to the Soviet Union for Israel's interests, which were directly counter to America's interests. So no 2 countries have the same interests. So for a traitor like Jonathan Pollard no punishment is too severe from my perspective. On the other hand, there is more to this story, and that is behavior which is completely unacceptable to you, unexplainable, not understandable, outrageous, ridiculous, stupendous, freakish, bizarre, right? This is Netanyahu, all right, reaching out to Jonathan Pollard, greeting him as he gets off the plane. Okay, so this kind of behavior makes no sense to almost anyone unless you're on the Jewish right. So as a friend pointed out, Netanyahu is a politician. Pollard did 30 years in prison. It's not a light sentence. It's far disproportionate to what America usually gives people who commit similar crimes. Now you can make an argument that there have been no crimes similar to this. Like, I don't care. Whatever America did to Pollard, I would have been fine with. If they'd hung, drawn, and quartered him, I would have been fine with that. Now, Netanyahu is a politician. He's got an election coming up, and Jonathan Pollard is seen as a martyr by the super right wing that Netanyahu needs to win in another election in 2 months. So Netanyahu gets to take credit for his release. So unless you're in this in-group, Netanyahu's behavior makes no sense. In fact, it's shameful. It's ridiculous. It's horrifying. It makes you furious. But to a certain subset of voters that Netanyahu might well need, this behavior makes sense. Right? So if you have a strong right-wing Jewish Israeli identity, then you see everything through the prism of what's good for the Jews. You don't really care about the consequences to outgroups, which is a fairly normal human perception. Most people don't care very much about what happens to outgroups. Now, if you're wise and you may be incredibly dedicated to Israel and to the Jewish people, if you're wise, you'd know that this kind of greeting at the airport by Israel's prime minister is going to infuriate patriotic Americans and thereby cause much more damage to Israel in the long term. So Netanyahu is gambling that this behavior will attract him votes. That's why he's doing it, and that it won't cause long-term damage to the Israel-American relationship. I have complete sympathy with Americans who are outraged that Israel's prime minister would come honor this traitor who may have done incalculable damage to America's best interests. So this is a show about understanding more than getting outraged. So I'm not here to milk the outrage. This is not an outrage porn show. I understand the outrage. Yeah, I like what Laponia says. Netanyahu's move is checkers, not chess. Well, if it turns out to be ill-advised, Netanyahu probably won't pay the price. Israel might pay the price. Yeah, free Jonathan Pollard and Ron Jeremy, fierce patriots. Let Jonathan Pollard bang, bro. Jonathan Pollard did nothing wrong, bros. Men like Colin are significant impediments to correcting this cultural appropriation. Don't plead with cultural destroyers. You demand they change, period. Well, how effective is that going to be? I thought Colin's analysis was pretty sharp. Fox News headline, see it, swarms of teens block traffic, attack SUV in broad daylight. Wow, Laponius is finally taking a break. Parnassa acquisition will have to wait until the new year. That's great. We get to spend more time together, Laponius. So Skinflint Congress coughs up only $56 for each Israeli citizen. This is from the neocon desk at Trad News. What's wrong with these skinflints in Congress? Well, they're more than happy to splash out an enormous $600 on every work-shy, undeserving U.S. citizen. They're only giving a noble Israel a measly $500 million in total in the latest omnibus spending bill. This is a pathetic 0.25% of the money being given directly to average Americans. Works out at a piffling and insulting $56 per Israeli citizen, or only 15 cents a day. Crafty U.S. politicians have taken the average American's deep love of Israel turned it into a massive weapons program that can then be used to dump pork barrel spending in their constituencies, ensuring their re-election. So is there any way to treat America's greatest ally? That's pretty funny. So no, I don't think that Americans are just in love with Israel. I think Americans are like people everywhere in the world. They primarily care about their own group. I think any affection in America for Israel overall is fairly mild. It's not really a big deal because it would be weird to get incredibly excited about subsidizing some foreign nation. Like Americans care primarily about Americans, Australians care primarily about Australians. That's the nature of the human condition. All right, so let's go back to critiquing my friend Godwood and his podcast. Godwood podcast. The elites kind of let startups start a YouTube channel because they know no one can really make a difference without institutional support, just as an individual. So if you make enough waves as an individual, they'll send an institution to appropriate and control the speech. And I'm not a big fan of this kind of analysis. It seems to be promoting helplessness and hopelessness. Right? People often choose a politics to suit their aesthetics, to suit their spouse, to suit their family, to suit their community, or to suit powerlessness or helplessness. So the message of these kind of tweets is that, hey, the elites run things, which is a more politically correct way of saying Jews run things. And so if a Jew tells a non-Jew to go suck off a dog, what's the guy to do? He's absolutely helpless and hopeless in the hands of these, crafty Jewish elites. So one thing that's undeniable is that losers love conspiracy theories. What I mean here by conspiracy theory is not conspiracy theory in the literal sense that, yes, 9/11 was a conspiracy theory. Al-Qaeda conspired to commit 9/11. I mean conspiracy theory as it is popularly understood, that truths which are denied by all our elites and all our mainstream media, that there are important truths that our elites and our media are denying us, such as that 9/11 was an inside job. So when people talk conspiracy theories, they don't mean the literal sense of a conspiracy. They mean that what we are told in the news media and by the academy and by our elites, that is often just a complete lie, and that reality is completely different from the picture that we're given by our news media and our elites. So what type of people are appealed to by these kind of conspiracy theories? And that's losers, right? Winners recognize the power of human agency. So the more successful the person, the less likely they are to believe that the government committed 9/11, that it was an inside job. But some people find life just so frustrating, so painful. It's like when I crashed my car. I bought a car in the summer of 1985, a 1968 Volkswagen Bug. I cleaned it. I took such great care of it. I loved my car. I invested in it. And then, through my own carelessness, I ran it into the back of a school bus. I crushed the front of my car. And I got it repaired, but I never loved the car again. My desire to love and nurture my car had been completely destroyed by my own carelessness. So if your own carelessness with your own life leads you to completely destroy things, then you're going to look to a mindset that says, hey, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong, bro. Faults out there. There's a shadowy elite who's controlling things, and they're not going to let anyone challenge their power. So there are many reasons why people choose politics, but I think one of them is that people look for a politics that justifies their own failures and that explains and sanctifies and justifies their own feelings of helplessness. So if you're frustrated with life, choose a type of politics that says, hey, you're not to blame. You didn't do anything wrong, bro. It's those shadowy elites. So to analyze this tweet on a literal level, shadowy elites don't literally decide YouTube policy. Like, who are these elites? Where do they meet? And when do they decide these policies? So YouTube decides its own policies, and all its policies are very easily explainable by what will make YouTube the most friendly to advertisers and cause it the least grief from critics. So critics on the right complaining about censorship, they don't have any power. So YouTube can essentially give them the middle finger. It's people on the left, people in the center who complain about extremism on YouTube. They've been very effective organizing to change YouTube policies. So if you're not part of groups that are effective at organizing to change YouTube policies, then YouTube can safely ignore you. So all of YouTube's decisions can be understood just on the basis of good business, of attracting advertisers. Now, do I think that's the sole reason for YouTube and Google's decisions? No. I understand that Google and YouTube and big tech are overwhelmingly run by people who are left of center. So I believe that they look at the world through a left of center vision, and that does have an effect. I believe primarily they make the decision based on business, but there's also a substantial effect from their preferences. Now, this idea that elites don't want you to make a difference. Well, there have been all sorts of movements that have bubbled up from below in society, such as the Tea Party movement, the Trump movement, the Occupy Wall Street movement. So if you're convinced that the elites run things and will not allow anything to bubble up from underneath them, then how do you explain the election of Donald Trump in 2016? He's elected president of the United States against the opposition of most elites in academia, in the media, on Wall Street, in corporations. So Donald Trump overtook the Republican Party, then defeated the Democratic Party, and one guy made a pretty big difference. He became president of the United States. So the ideology behind this tweet is essentially nothing you do will make any difference, that these shadowy elites will always find ways to squash you, so you might as well just give up and turn your life over to Jesus. Now, can an individual make a difference without institutional support? Well, Donald Trump did not really have any institutional support when he took over the Republican Party. Didn't have much institutional support when he defeated the Democrats in 2016 presidential election, and he won a term as president of the United States. So to me, that's just one of many examples of how an individual can make a difference. We have one guy who essentially set off the Arab Spring, one guy who I think committed suicide in a spectacular way in, was it Tunisia, and then set off the Arab Spring. We have so many examples in history of one person making a difference. The Tea Party became a considerable power in the United States and was turned into a national movement by one man's rant on CNBC. Rick Santelli's rant on CNBC created a national Tea Party movement. Talk radio has considerable power, and individuals can come along and create talk radio as we now know it. Syndicated right-wing talk radio, as we've had it for the last 30 years, was the product primarily of one person, Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh created the current genre of right-wing talk radio. It's a combination of entertainment and politics. So, yeah, I think one person can make a difference. You matter, bro. You're in the no-fap zone. So, you can do it.
Savage, it's good to see you, my friend.
Thank you for having me. We're back.
Kyle Kalinske, a voice of reason, a person who actually understands politics.
That's debatable.
It is debatable.
We'll see how much the voice of reason I am.
I will say, I will lean towards you knowing what you're talking about. What's going on?
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Sorry,
so do you have an opinion about how this is going to go down?
Do I have a prediction?
Yes.
Okay, and basically that's the whole show. Does Kyle Kalinske, a guy that you might remember from 5 years ago, have an opinion? And they just let this nerd, Kyle, talk the whole time. Are we back up now?
Yep, I think it was just a little hiccup.
Great, we're back up. So we're watching Rogan. When does the McDonald's come into play? Do we have that?
I
Did
don't
we
know.
forget
You might
that?
be able to see.
Yeah, let's see. So this was really weird. You know, and a lot of people have our theories. Let's see when the McDonald's, if anyone knows, is that it? Yep. We have our theories like either Joe is trying to, you could tell Joe reads the comments. He's been really upset about what people are saying about him. I think he's trying to show you that he's just one of the guys. They ordered McDonald's, bags of McDonald's, and they eat it. They showcase it. They speak of it. Could this be another one of Joe's disingenuous hidden ads. We're going to find out here today. Let's watch.
Some mental health issues.
Here we go,
substance-
McDonald's.
Substance issues, particularly with booze. And he also is constantly around conspiracies. And I think you get legitimately psychotic when you delve down those roads. I think you lose your fucking mind.
It's a tough...
And he lost his fucking mind. He lost his fucking mind on more than one occasion. He has. But
And he
he's
knows he's
not
made
what everybody
mistakes.
says he is. Is your mic on? Jamie, I think your mic's on. It's very loud over there.
Listen to
He
this
knows he's
sound.
made
This is
mistakes.
bad
He said on
enough.
the show that he wants to, correct his mistakes. Like,
But the thing is, he
This is-
also
There you
go.
gives out a lot
So
of...
out of nowhere, this Big Mac McDLT, a quarter pounder with some cheese, and of course, everyone's been making fun of. They gave Joe Special 2 fish fillets, right? Jules, tell us about this fish fillet.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's got a beautiful...
You actually like it.
It's my favorite
You
McDonald's
get the
order.
fish fillet.
Yes, a lot. It's
What
got a
you-
smooth, shiny, buttery bun. Oh my god, it's so good. Then it has a little squared
Really?
fish patty.
Ew,
Then it's got...
fish.
I usually get it without cheese because that's
Imagine
gross, but
eating
it does have
fish
cheese.
from McDonald's.
It's got
I mean,
tartar sauce. It's like fish and chips in a sandwich.
that's so disgusting. As a kid, they go, "Did you want?"
Okay, what's Andy Nowicki got for us here?
Early. This vote early push is out of control here. Look at this. Every 20 feet, there's another sign saying vote early, vote early, vote. Look at this. This is unbelievable. They really want you. It's really important for you to not wait until election day to vote. Now there's some respite here along this stretch.
What's wrong with the message of vote early? What's the problem? Make the point. Make a point. Make an
Okay.
argument.
Well,
Andy.
we seem to have
Make an argument.
finally
What's wrong?
left
What's wrong
the
with voting early?
region of, well, no, here's a couple more.
You have an argument.
Here
Come
they
on,
are
man.
again.
You have an argument, a point.
Vote early. Vote early. Vote
What's the
for
problem?
the domestic abuser, Warnock.
We're at the end of the
Vote
video.
our future.
You haven't told us what the problem is with
God, I
voting
hate
early,
this
Andy.
place.
Come on, man.
Come back, General Sherman. Come back. All is forgiven.
Come on, Andy. You had 69 seconds there to make a point why it's bad to vote early, and I didn't hear it. So I don't have a particularly strong opinion on whether it's right or wrong to vote early. Glib says Luke thinks it's his independent, rational thinking that gives him low ratings when it's actually the red shirt. Tim Poole said in one video, Civil War II, bring it on, baby, celebrating ratings over human life. John notes Joe Rogan's content has gotten worse since he moved to Texas. Luke, in 2021, try a mashup of Bitcoin, incels, and post-Trump Trumpism. Okay, so Art Bell's got some videos for me. As a kid, my mother would take us to McDonald's secretly, but we could only get filet fish and fries. That's being fake Orthodox kosher. Half fake kosher. All right, I've got more wisdom for you on Godwood Podcast tweet. Kind of let startups start a YouTube channel because they know no one can really make a difference without institutional support just as an individual. So if you make enough waves as an individual, they'll send an institution to appropriate and control the speech. So the subtext is, well, you might as well give up, Goy. I mean, why would someone put so much energy into making tweets to tell people that their lives and choices are pointless and worthless as far as making any difference in the wider world? So this tweet is arranged in a way that it's vague enough so that it's kind of unfalsifiable. Like what information could falsify this tweet? Martin Luther in the 16th century nailed 99 theses to the wall and he changed the world, right? We have example after example in history of one person doing one thing and changing the world. Also, I could point out to Godwood all these alternatives to YouTube, and he could still come back with all these arguments. Like, he's a very intelligent guy, far more accomplished than I am in many areas, far more educated than I am in many areas. And my show has not been the same since he left. But I could come back to him and say, hey, there are all these alternatives to YouTube. Rumble is great. Like, Rumble videos work better than YouTube videos. It's like superior tech to YouTube. And he could say, well, it's all pointless because YouTube is the most traffic. Well, you can write what you want on a blog. I mean, 400 years ago, there were people like Godward complaining, well, the elites control all the printing presses. How are we ever going to be able to make social change unless you've got a printing press? You know, what are we going to do? Just write our thoughts down on a piece of paper and then hammer them onto a church door like Martin Luther? Martin Luther, I assume he wrote out his 99 Theses, but it's certainly possible, even if he didn't, he could have written out his 99 Theses, hammered them to a church door, and changed history. And he didn't even have his own YouTube channel. So I notice on the dissident right in particular, but in dissident politics generally, people oscillate between thinking that they can change the world and then thinking that they can't make any difference. Like, people hate the moderate middle road. So the same people who were yelling in 2016 after Trump's victory, we've taken back our country. Yeah, we're in charge now. Things are going to change around here. Now they're going full conspiracy theory, retarded, or just quietist. Might as well give up and just turn over our lives to Jesus. Well, if you turn over your lives to Jesus or to Christianity, there's no inherent politics that comes from that. Say with Judaism, there is no inherent politics that accompanies being an observant Jew. There's no inherent politics that accompanies being a Christian. Christianity and Judaism are both sufficiently flexible that they can adapt and adopt to any kind of politics. There's no inherent politics that flows from being a religious Jew or a religious Christian. So I don't like this conspiracy thinking of the low IQ variety. It's for losers. It just promotes giving up or going suicidal. I mean, what Socrates, he was a man of such integrity that when he had an opportunity to flee after being convicted of corrupting the youth, he chose to stay and take the poison. I mean, what if Socrates had simply quit teaching when he lost tenure? Like, oh man, I got fired from my job, I lost tenure, I might as well give up. Now, what if Jesus had given up when he got arrested, just like thrown in the towel? Yeah, I know God, my father, sent me down here to save humanity, but this is a bummer. Now I'm in the hands of these nasty Romans. I'm just going to give up, right? Jesus didn't have a YouTube channel, but he kept doing his thing according to the Gospels. Now, what if George Washington had quit at Valley Forge? It's like, it's just too cold here. I don't have clean sheets. The food sucks. Right? Well, do you think George Washington would have just quit if he had this Godward podcast attitude? Or what if the founders of the United States and they just found compromise just too distasteful? Oh man, I don't have to work with those jerks from South Carolina or those idiots from New York. I just give up. Why don't we just revert back to British sovereignty? Or what if Abraham Lincoln, after going through 4 generals and none of them got the job done, he said, I might as well give up. We might as well just sue for peace with the South. All right, let me engage here with Godward podcast. I find it more energizing when I engage with a friend. Like I'd rather play tennis with a friend. I'd rather play YouTube videos essentially with a friend. He doesn't come on my show anymore, so I might as well just talk to his Twitter feed. So he says, as soon as your individual YouTube channel or message becomes scalable, it will get swallowed by institutions. So what, you might as well just give up? They let us talk because our talk cannot have influence until they welcome us at the door. Yeah, the shadowy elite, they just control everything. And if they tell us to go suck off a dog, what choice do we have? And this is interesting. Is the response. Felisa says, men will literally learn everything about ancient Rome instead of going to therapy. That's true. And Godward says, exactly, it actually works, probably better than therapy. Well, in some circumstances, I'm sure it is better than therapy. In other circumstances, I'm sure it's a wash. It's co-equal with therapy. And in some circumstances, it is inferior to therapy. Is that too hard to believe that some people get some benefit from therapy? Other people, it's not clear if they got any benefit. Some people are made worse. And for some people, it's a waste of time. Surely there's a whole spectrum of reactions to therapy. So, can you recover fully without telling your therapist everything?
Can you recover fully without telling your therapist everything? For example, they know about your depression and help you with that, but they don't know about your self-harm. I know mine would tell my parents if she knew, so I don't want to tell her. Yes and no. I believe fully and completely that if we want to work on something, we want to get better, we'll get better. So if you're working with a therapist and they know about your depression, I would utilize that to talk about the depressive voice or the depression. And in your mind, know that when you're talking about the depression, you're also talking about self-harm. And it kind of helps for you to integrate it into what you're working on. If we don't talk about / work on the issue, whatever it is, even if it's just in our mind, us working on it, journaling about it, then I don't really believe we can get better. But if we're working on it, which it sounds like you're definitely wanting to get better, you're working with your therapist, I think we definitely can. You don't have to tell them about the self-harm if you don't want your parents knowing right away, as long as you're targeting that self-harm urge and voice and you're finding alternatives. And you could even say, like, my depression comes in really quick and I need to come up with some different distraction tools and just kind of working it in so you're not actually talking about the self-harm, but you're still getting help for it. And if you haven't checked out my website, KatieMorton.com, I have a free self-harm workbook on there. So download it and get started because that will help you as well. Okay? Question number 3. What do I do if I want to go back to counseling, but I don't want my parents knowing? I'm almost 8.
Okay, I think that's enough, but thanks, Katie. That was awesome. Yeah, what does it mean to let Jesus take the wheel, right? What does that mean socially, politically? I think letting Jesus take the wheel is so amorphous. It's just like letting God take the wheel, letting Allah take the wheel. I don't think it necessarily translates into any particular politics. So Godwood does not believe that sex scenes are necessary. No plot point has been driven by a good sex scene, or has there ever been a film made better by a sex scene? Yes, this is the whole point. The normies have it right. We need to go back to sleep. The elites love us. Trust the plan. Right? This is absurd. Who seriously argues that the elites love us? Nobody loves entire groups in any meaningful sense unless it's your particular in-group. So who's saying, oh, we need to go back to sleep? So this is what you notice with people into conspiracy theories. It's like, oh, we're the ones who are awake. Everyone else is asleep, yet the upshot of the conspiracy theories that we believe in makes us losers and ineffective at life and essentially makes us passive and give up. Right? That's the upshot of retailing and believing in ridiculous conspiracy theories. What's going on in Nashville?
Officers did not have enough evidence for a search warrant of Warner's property. He believes his officers did everything they could do legally. Perhaps they could have followed up more, he says, but hindsight is 20/20. Brett.
Mike Tobin in Nashville. Mike, thanks. Los Angeles County prosecutors are pushing back tonight against the new district attorney's directive that would end most.
Okay, so let me go back here. Talk about Godwood's point. That's the point. The elites let us talk because our talk cannot have influence until they welcome us at the door. I mean, really, an individual is unable to influence others. Like Martin Luther, an individual didn't change history. And who says people should just go back to sleep? Who says that the elites love us? Who says trust the plan? What serious person talks this way? Nobody serious speaks this way. And whether you're asleep or awake, how much of a difference can you make on national issues? On your own, usually very little, but you can make a tiny difference. So if you can only make a modest difference, does that mean you just give up? Right? This extremists, they just go all over the map to, we're taking back our country, Trump won, we might as well give up and just turn over everything to Jesus. And we got Doovid back on the show. Doovid, really looking sharp there, my friend. Okay, I can't hear you, so that's probably on my end. So let me... Okay, this is definitely on my end, Doovid, so just hang with me. What have we got? Okay. Okay, Doovid, try again. Yep, gotcha. Yep. Thanks. So looking good, Dooovid. Like it.
soon, but I haven't completely decided. But yeah, thanks for having me on, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me about your experience on that recent documentary on race that you did with a lady from Australia.
It was kind of interesting because I had no idea who she was, and it's an interesting lesson because I think these two other guys are probably much more famous internet personalities, and actually it recommended me, and I'll explain that. But I just get a random Twitter message from this woman, Dia Latina, I never heard of her, who says she wants to interview me about racism in America, and she needs a Jew. So I'm like, I'm only half Jew. Like I could recommend, I even have some audience in Australia that I know on Twitter and Discord. I was like, maybe I could even give you a Jew in Australia, but she was like, no, I want you. So I was like, okay, fine, great. So I spoke to her for like 2 hours. I think it was like Thursday night or something that I got the Twitter. And so, the first lesson of Judaism I had to give her was the Sabbath. So, because I said yes, and she was like, let's do it right away. And after the Sabbath, and we spoke for like 2 hours, and that was it. She didn't really explain to me who else was going to be in it or what it was about, but I figured like, yeah, sure. And I told her like, she opens it up with, I love defending the Jews. Like, yeah, it's my pleasure. You're going to give me an opportunity to defend the Jews. I'll take you up on it, or to, preach my game. And I looked at her channel. She had, I think she was actually on Adam Kokesh earlier today, but I saw names like a Philosoph Cat and other names that I'd recognized on her channel. And I think she even has some, real members of parliament are there in Australia. So I invited her the day after the interview on Week in Review with Jennifer, and she took me up and she asked me if she could bring, and this is on Week in Review, anyone who watches me and Jennifer on Week in Review, if she could bring the other guy. So this guy Reviler came on the show, and it was ironic because when he came on the show, Jennifer recognized him instantly, and like she didn't like this guy. He had trolled her before, and she had issues, and so but that was an interesting Week in Review, and so it was a little bit weird. And Jennifer ends up kicking him, and we talked with Dia a little bit, but it was like bad female energy between Jennifer and Dia because Jennifer's educated physics, but Dia's a bigger YouTube personality. I mean, she actually has a bigger reach on YouTube, so there's some sort of female dynamic that she could probably explain better than me. But then it turns out that Dia told me that this guy Reviler is the one that told her to interview me. So wherever he came across me, and maybe he'd spoke, maybe he's a personality in our chats that we didn't know. But yeah, I mean, so this Reviler guy, he's probably more famous. Like, she wanted, God forbid, to make a documentary on racism. So, this guy Reviler, and another guy Gypsy. Had you heard of either of those two guys, Luke?
No, never.
And I think, this Gypsy guy, I guess, is a Proud Boy, and they do crazy stuff like dark web and maybe the guns and, just straight N-word and violence. And, so she probably wanted to make like a shockumentary. And so those guys are her main acts. And she just wanted a Jew, I guess. I guess I basically verified her stereotypes, where from her perspective, she's basically saying that, look at this guy Doovid. He basically verifies all of the stereotypes of, God forbid, why people don't like Jews, from like an alt-right perspective, multiculturalism, immigration, globalism. But she's coming at it like I get her to say she loves the Jews, but Doovid deserves the respect and to be treated like a human being. So the documentary kind of has the tones like this alt-right Australian figure is, using Doovid to show like, look, like he is a Jew. And, everyone knows, God forbid, that Jews promote multiculturalism and immigration and globalism. And there's nothing we could do about that. But like, they're still human. And, these guys are, I mean, I'm not sure if that's the read you got out of it. And the two black guys she spoke to, were relatively pretty normal. You know, like I would say, like, you know, like she wanted to find a black nationalist. She told me but she didn't have so much success. So she included 2 interviews with blacks. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with this personality? And I don't know how high you'd rank her in like the alt-right in Australia, but
never heard of her, Dia Beltran. But how did you feel about your segment on her program?
I mean, I thought I sounded like she gave me a pretty good interview. Like I made my points, and I wanted to express clearly, like my intention going in was to explain, yes, generally Jews do favor immigration and multiculturalism, but it doesn't mean like we're trying to ruin your society. It's just part of like a greater Judaic belief system. And so I was kind of ceding a little bit of ground to her superstitions, or whatever way she views Jews as a alt-right Australian personality, and my own personal perspective. I was saying, like, beyond that, that we're doing that from our perspective in a way that we think is going to make the world a better place. And even if we're wrong, we're just blinded by our own perspective. I mean, I guess it was some form of apologetics like that. I guess I've been doing for a few years now. And, if we talk about something else, the root and branch, I might be helping turning them to streaming. And, I was thinking that, from the nature of what we could accomplish streaming, and we were talking about that, maybe you could give me some input or advice on what to do with that. But I mean, from the nature of streaming, I thought that was about as good as I could do. Like, I knew she was going to clip it for her purposes. I gave her elementary. I spent like a good hour just explaining like Judaism 101, like pure basic, like, she didn't even know what Sabbath was. And then we talked about the Bible and Jesus, and, so it was 2 hours, and she clipped like 15 minutes of me confirming, alt-right superstitions, but her coming out as kind of like the good guys of defending me against, people like Reviler or Gypsy that unfairly attack Jews.
So she was under the misapprehension that you're a Zionist, and I don't believe you are a Zionist. Is that correct? In the modern secular sense?
But I thought it was, she really did not know too much about Judaism. So, there's even a story with the Satmar Rebbe like that, where I think the Satmar Rebbe met one of the presidents, and the president mentioned something kind of like pro-Zionist, and the Rebbe didn't say anything. And afterwards, and the Rebbe's like, this guy is not going to understand this, God forbid. But like, no, I didn't think it was I was going to be able to explain, like how I'm promoting Judaism and anti-Zionist at the same time, or how that's, and it didn't come up. Like, she basically asked me questions and then clipped it. But her level of understanding of Israeli politics to know that there's like religious anti-Zionism, I thought that would have just made it unnecessarily complicated.
But I'm correct, right? You are not a Zionist, because Zionism is a secular ideology that supports a secular Jewish state in the current.
And she clipped me. She puts the Israeli flag behind me and starts playing like some Jewish music in the video. And even where she clips me, like, she's trying to get me, she's basically pressing me, is like, are you more loyal to Israel or to the United States? And she clipped me. So first I said, I'm more loyal to God. My first loyalty is to God. And, I'm loyal. And I gave some sort of like apologetics where I say, like, no, I'm loyal to God and to my neighbors, and I care about being a good, honest citizen. And then I use like, but of course my heart is in Israel. So I said that from my heart, where I just said, yeah, my heart's in Israel. Like, I'm a Jew. I constantly think about Israel. And the fact that I'm an anti-Zionist doesn't mean that, like, I don't spend hours every day obsessing about Israel. So when she has me clipped saying like, of course, like, like all Jews' hearts are in Israel, I wasn't talking about the state of Israel. I was talking about, from a Torah perspective, but from the clip, that may not be clear.
Yeah. And you are fine with multiculturalism in Israel today. You're fine with non-Jewish immigration. You don't have a problem with that, correct?
Yeah, but I don't have standing to. I'm in the U.S. and I'm directing society the way I want it here. I have close to no influence to direct society in Israel. So my opinion on Israel, like I'm a Jew and I haven't. I mean, it's the main question. I didn't mind answering that question because I had a few, points, like even to Adam Green. In the first one is kind of like, so what? And I kind of admitted that to her, that Jews, we like to care about Israel. We like to build up power and wealth in the United States, and to be able to freely use that wealth and power that we've built up in the United States to help out Israel. And if society makes it more difficult for Jews to do that, that generally that will make America less amenable to Jews. I mean, I think almost all experts on Judaism would agree to that. Certainly there's some Jews who are going to assimilate or a greater strategy. But that I think, I mean, you agree with generally what I'm saying, like the Jews that you're friends with out there right now in understanding of America, we could be great Americans and fine American citizens and friends with non-Jews and everything, and benefit America, and at the same time benefit Israel. And it's only problematic to a small minority. Well, we call it a minority, it might be growing, but it's not. It's only problematic to a minority of people that generally aren't in power. But certainly there's an element of people that are in a minority that aren't in power that could conceivably grow and be in power. But for Jews to function, as Jews, we want a society that's going to allow us to, and I would assume that's the case in Australia also. Like your average Jew in Australia, like their heart is in Israel. Even the anti-Zionist Jews in Australia want to be able to garner wealth and respect in Australia and leverage that to help out Jews in Israel, even if they're anti-Zionist.
Well, most Jews in America don't care that much about Israel. So we primarily know Orthodox Jews. So Orthodox Jews tend to have much more intense feelings about Israel, either pro or con, but most American Jews don't care very, very deeply. So for a third of American Jews, they don't care at all. And the fact that American Jews choose to live in America shows that their primary concern is with America. If they were primarily concerned with Israel, they'd move there.
Yeah, so I'll call it apologetics, like, even more so than Mark Shapiro, who I might incorrect call it apology, but my Jewish apologetics is saying, like, yeah, it's natural for Jews to feel like this and to promote activities like this in the public square. But it's not pejorative. It's not because Jews are purposely trying to ruin Gentile nations. It's kind of just a group conflict and a natural tendency of the outgrowth of Judaism that's how we view societies. And even say, like, yeah, like when you said the JQ is a good question, because as a believing Jew, I would call it like a karmatic reward and punishment balance that yes, I think it's possible that I could be a good American to such an extent that I could produce excess and use that excess to help out Israel. And right now, that's mainstream Americanism from almost all positions of power. Obviously, there's pushback, and saying most immigrants who come from other countries send money back to the places where they come from, and things like assimilation and the cultural shift. I mean, your show's, you're probably one of the best shows that to ever even discuss the issue. It's an important issue, but that's what I was trying to clarify, and I wanted her for her to understand it, where it'd be like, yes, like there are stereotypical Jewish things that could seem bothersome to anybody in right-wing politics, like immigration, that if you're on the right wing, it's likely that you might have a tendency to be anti-immigrant, and you're going to find that a lot of the pro-immigration activists are in fact Jews. And it doesn't mean the Jews are your enemy. It just means there's something about Judaism that tends to make us pro-immigration. And that was the message I was trying to express.
And another disconnect that I noticed in the interview was that she was asking you how things should be, and you were mainly talking to her, at least the excerpts that she played, about how things are. So she wanted you to say, well, things should be this way and things should be that way. And you're explaining essentially the complications of human nature, the hypocrisies of human nature.
Yeah, I was going to give her a full Pilpul lesson. Like, she wanted to learn about Judaism, and Doovid was there for, an immersion experience in Pilpul.
Yeah, but you weren't but you weren't primarily
emergent experience of Pilpul.
But you weren't talking in terms of what Jews should do or shouldn't do. You were talking about what Jews do. There's a very big difference between describing reality and prescribing behavior.
Yeah, and the Pilpul, that there's going to be multiple paths and trends within the path, and more complications where things appear to be contradictions or aren't, or things don't appear to be contradictions, really are. That she knew something about theology. She's not dumb. She's a YouTube personality. She's doing this out of her own volition and interest. I guess she's a half breed of I don't know, an Australian mestizo, Germanic and South American stock. I don't know what they call that in Australia.
Yeah, she's got a mother who's part Native American Indian, and a father who is Spanish, I believe, but came from.
No, I think she's half white.
Yeah. Or.
I think she said Germanic even.
And I think she's mentioned she's like 3% Sephardic Jew according to a DNA test as well.
Oh yeah, I could be wrong, but it was my, she reached out to have someone explain to her Judaism. I was happy to do it. Although I at first, I've informed her I'm only half Jew, and she could probably find other. But she wants to talk to me specifically. I'm happy to do it. But I did inform her that, she could probably find a more mainstream Jew to talk to than me.
And Jen says that she was frightfully condescending and self-aggrandized. Was that your experience?
She has the presence of a YouTube streamer. Like Jennifer is, Jennifer's like, she has a lot of potential. She's really smart, but she's not a streamer in the same way. And, I think that Dia had like the comfortability of the numbers, just saying like she's the one producing documentaries. She's the one interviewing Australian politicians. She's the one who, has these streaming, she just got bigger numbers at the time. But Jennifer is a more logical truth purist. So, so it's saying like, doesn't, what are your axioms and are they true? And, so just, you could have false axioms and false conclusions and still be a popular YouTuber. So, and plus, that she's knew this guy Reviler who had trolled her. The documentary person that she's featuring is a violent psychopath. He might have some, God forbid, redeemable qualities. And if you watched it, it's a typical alt-right thing where he becomes a lot more, he's like pointing guns at people and
is this the Gypsy Crusader guy? Is he the one that she brought on?
No, it's the Reviler, the blue-eyed man. Gypsy Crusader and Reviler, I guess, are buddies in the dark web, but they're. But I'm saying like this guy had trolled Jennifer, like, and so definitely there was some sort of beef. Like I don't think Jennifer wanted this guy Reviler. Like I think he came into her show like that's what he does. He's not like a handsome truth, but he's but he's got like guns and he's much more worse version than handsome truth probably. But I was saying that the guy she was interviewing, this was before I knew who the other people she was speaking to. She just told me she was doing a documentary about racism and wanted to talk to a Jew. I did not know who she was going to speak to as the other guest. So when she brought on this guy Reviler, the fact that Jennifer recognized him as this guy who had pulled this stunt on her, like that's obviously created a little bit of tension. And then, I think Dia is probably a little bit of a shock jock, like to a certain extent, that's what I'm saying.
And so what topics did you guys discuss on the Week in Review?
We're getting more technical and more Hindu, I would say. So a lot more science, math, consciousness, and a lot more Hinduism, and we've gotten a new crew of people, I guess, that found us and had more interest in the topics we want to talk about. As opposed, you obviously know know that you get bigger viewerships by talking about topics that are more interesting to more people than talking about topics that you want to talk about. So we've been more focusing, on just talking what we want to talk about, and had some successes. Really. Can I tell you about this root and branch?
Yeah.
So I mentioned Les Glassman to you, right?
Yeah.
So Les Glassman is a South African dentist who made Aliyah like 20 some years ago, and in many ways like Luke Ford and Doovid, he just went around with a camera, recording things, putting it up on YouTube, and I think me and Luke both did that for a long time, and so Les has like 6 million views. I think he has 30,000 videos. So there's another man, Lowell Gallon, who was a media Hollywood educated. I think he's even gotten to Harvard, or and he made Aliyah, moved to Israel like 20 more than 25 years ago, and he started what he called the Root and Branch Association, which just had lectures Monday and Wednesday nights in Israel, sometimes every Monday and Wednesday, but not consistently. And he's been doing it for 25 years. So Les Glassman, just a dentist who loves Judaism, stamp collector, even worked for the Israeli government on behalf of their stamp commission. But he was going to these and he was videoing him and he was putting it up in his YouTube. So he made him his partner. And, so the Root and Branch has been them two for 25 years. And only now, because of COVID-19, they switched it to online. Like for decades, they've been doing the lectures and putting them up on YouTube for people like me and Luke, the same thing that Luke has been doing and I've been doing. So because of COVID-19, they started doing it on Zoom, and I'd actually heard of their lecture series because I love this stuff. I watched Les Glassman's YouTube because I like lectures. I'm constantly searching YouTube for lectures on various topics, and Les Glassman has a ton of the stuff, like these symposiums in Jerusalem on various topics, and it's really one of the only places on YouTube to find a lot of these type things, especially stuff on like the Holocaust. So this guy Gallon, Luke has been playing this the whole time. Saw me debating Adam Green. I guess he likes Adam Green, or likes not liking him. He watches it, and he found me and he commended me, and reached out to me, and invited me to join his program. And like he'd known Roseanne Barr, so it was purely he saw me on another channel, reached out to me, and now I'm like his co-host. And so Jennifer's offered to help him out, and instead of recording these Zoom sessions and putting them up on their YouTube pages, I'm telling them like they got to go live, and they're boomers. Saying these guys were like these guys were adult men who moved to Israel 30 years ago. I mean they're not. I don't know. They may only be in their 60s, but I'm saying they're not from the younger generation that knows how to do these things. But Jennifer said she'd walk them through. I think they would be able to do it. So I as a mitzvah, just to be part of it, because like me and Luke has the picture of the kotel in his background. It's not for no reason. So if I could be part of a podcast in Jerusalem, I would definitely take that opportunity. Especially it's not like news. It's like a speaker series with interesting people. Today we had Jim Long, a Noahide from Missouri, who traveled the world and is trying to prove that the biblical chronology corresponds to the archaeological record. And they would probably have Luke speak, also tell his story. And Charles Moskowitz also, who saw me on Adam Green and reached out to me on Twitter, left me his cell phone number, told me to call him, and I did. And now we've been streaming every Thursday for like 2 months, and I call that Partners in Torah, so that's going pretty good. I'm not sure if we can make it interesting. Like Luke, you have a history in media. You're in Hollywood. You've done radio, sports, and other things. I don't think that we could necessarily make these root and branch talks in Jerusalem popular, and you had that guy Breidowitz on your channel. Breidowitz is also on it, but the Spartak Jewish guy, I forgot.
Yeah. Rabbi.
Yitzhak.
Yeah.
Well, Yitzhak.
Yeah, I don't remember his name, but so he's coming on the Root and Branch.
Yeah, I'm saying he spoke in Root and Branch a few weeks ago, and he came out to LA and you put him up on your YouTube, and me and you love this content. We love Judaism. I don't think there's a big market for it, but just as a content lover, I would like to help these guys improve their content, and just to be part of it, of a speaker series in Jerusalem. Like I told Charles and Luke, and I assume theologically Luke probably agrees. Like I want to make it to Jerusalem. I want to be like Les Glassman or Lowell Gallen, and be someone who retires to Jerusalem. That's what I told Dia Latina. Yes, like I don't consider myself a bad American because just because I want my future lot to include my retirement. You don't want to show this, Luke. This is a bit shoot. Like God forbid this.
Thanks. Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
I wasn't like this guy Reviler insisted she watch it. Yeah. So you could see that kind of personality, and she actually cries in the documentary. And I think he was trying to prove some sort of point, probably about anti-multiculturalism, or like, you think the Hispanics are such great people, this is what they really are, and forced her what they do to you in your own country type argument. So saying that she has the privilege of living in Australia. He was coming at her from the alt-right. So from the sort of say far right. So Doovid claims to be a right-wing figure. So Dia's attacking Doovid from the right and saying like, oh, this Jew isn't right-wing enough. He still supports immigration and multiculturalism. And then Reviler is coming at her from even further to the right.
Yeah. And so what's been going on with your Charles Moskowitz show? Any highlights?
One last point about this documentary. Why God forbid, like, I don't mind taking part of it because it proves my point that I made in the Root and Branch talk. Both of these guys said that censorship and pushback against basic questions caused them to become extreme. And the Proud Boy, the first guy, Gypsy, was at that New York event with the Proud Boys that you probably covered, where there was violence there, and the Antifa beat them all up, and then they also got arrested. And he said and now he's on YouTube like pulling guns on people, and he says that it was the people who tried to ruin his life because of his beliefs that made him extreme. And he even says that, like, you did this to me. So that's when I push back, like, me and Luke are anti-censorship. Both these guys, Reviler and Gypsy, tell her that, censorship, and he, I think they use like a greater, like, you did this to me.
Yeah.
And Gypsy actually dresses up like the Joker. That's his routine. The first guy she interviews, where his thing is actually dressing up like the Joker.
Yeah. Okay. What are some highlights? What have you been talking about with Charles Moskowitz?
He's like all Trump all the time. So like I try to get him talk a little bit Torah, but like it's always like for the last we had a little excursions of interesting stuff on theology because he's a wise man, knows a lot of history, and so even talking about Trump and bringing comparisons to Jewish theology and history and economics. But yeah, for the last really since we started, it's been him like, I'm not saying like he's all Trump all the time, but the last few weeks, he's big time into trying to still push that Trump is going to win the election. And he's had quite a few interviews. He had Jim Corsi on twice. One of those videos got a few thousand hits. And actually, he charges money. Like, people pay Charles Moskowitz to be on his podcast. I think like $100 for an interview. He's turned it into like author promotion. So a lot of right-wing authors that have books are having a hard time getting them out. actually pay Charles Moskowitz to do a podcast with them, and I guess he's got some sort of package deal. I mean, you know anything about doing that? You have any fellow streamers that do that, like a package? You get an interview, and then you'll have an interview on a series of different media formats, and then they could link that interview on their own media. So I mean, I guess your average author doesn't have streaming or interview talent, so if they could pay for like a softball interview and then link that interview on their own work, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's a great business model.
Yeah, so I think that's. I mean, he's probably got a series of people, maybe even pays people, but some interviewees, I'm sure but even I think Jim Corsi may have even paid him, and because he's probably having a hard time getting out there, and Sheriff Arpaio, and maybe even Arpaio, maybe he didn't. I mean, I think Charles probably would have done it for free for some of these personalities, but a lot of these people are right-wing pro-Trump voices, and there's less and less places for them to talk. And even Charles wouldn't be surprised if he won't remain on YouTube, but he's set himself up where he's on like I don't even know how many different 5-10 different media platforms, and as far as I know, he's still convinced that Trump is going to win this somehow, and so is Lowell Gallon, to mention that in Jerusalem, and he's still convinced somehow Trump is going to win this.
And how do you like the Christmas season?
I think it's going to, this year, COVID-19, like I was just looking at that chart. I think it's, like January is probably going to be the worst we've ever seen. And just like Purim was the perfect storm for Jews in the original infection case where we were just hearing about it, a Purim time, and didn't cancel Purim or do anything for Purim really. And then there was mass infection over Purim. And then, then the high holidays, Sukkah in Israel also. So Thanksgiving and Christmas are probably going to be super spreading events. And God forbid, we're just at the brink where Christmas, New Year's, as super spreading events could push the hospitals over capacity. And, that's what everyone was warning about. Then who knows what's going to happen. So, COVID-19, Christmas, I ordered food on a webpage and like that has vegetarian items, and it took my money, but then it turned out they were closed, but their webpage was still taking orders. But, you couldn't feel Christmas here with COVID-19. Nothing's open. Like there's families, like if you have loved ones or people to get together with, and even that, COVID-19's risky. Michigan's still under partial shutdown. Like Governor Whitmer, it's funny, she canceled Hanukkah but not Christmas, and it's probably a bad idea. Like she extended the lockdown through Hanukkah, and then didn't extend it or partially let it off a little bit for Christmas, because in politics is politics. Even Democrats, you're not going to win elections shutting down Christmas. But from a COVID-19 perspective, it was probably a bad move. They should have shut down Christmas, and it's probably going to be a super spreading event. And I predict that we're in lockdown. I mean, you out there, I think we're going to be in lockdown for at least another few months. And maybe the vaccine, if the vaccine gives a little bit of breathing room, otherwise, I think they said 1 in 37 Americans has been infected and 1 in 1,000 Americans have died. There's dispute over whether this new variant is more dangerous, is easier spreading, and it's not well understood. But it could reach a point where it gets way worse than it is right now. Like where I have 250,000 cases each day, where that could become 1 million cases each day, until 30% of America is infected, and God forbid, that would be millions of Americans dead. And from my just rational perspective, like I think that's the most likely thing to happen. God forbid, I don't want that to happen, but just looking at my analysis of what I understand about viruses, epidemiology, social distancing, all the measures we're trying to do, I think it's realistic to say that's pretty likely to happen.
Okay, but what are your feelings about Christmas in general? Is it a happy time being around people celebrating, or is it something that you find offensive? What's your general reaction to people celebrating Christmas all around you?
Well, I usually kind of like Christmas just because it's a more joyful gathering. You know, people are gathering even if it's for a different religion or a religion I don't subscribe to, but generally I would say people are on better behavior. Things are closed down. This year is different because there's just nothing. Like I don't like Christmas happened. Like there's a few neighbors that put up lights, but like no, I mean, I haven't done anything for months really. I haven't went to any event. I don't have any events that I'm invited to, and even if I was invited to an event, I wouldn't go. So usually Christmas is just it's like the holiday season. People aren't working, schools are off. There's interesting things happening. Even I'm going to go to church or a Christmas party. Like saying even most synagogues have Chinese Chinese dinner night or something like that. So we didn't even have like a Chinese dinner night.
Now, do you remember 2.5 years ago when we first started talking on here? I think you used to say I'm the alt-right. How do you look back upon that?
Honestly, I think I'm being proven correct because I had a libertarian angle. My angle on the alt-right was always libertarian. And I think at the end of the day, the only remaining point of the alt-right, there'll be a fight, but even like so to say, white nationalists, the various forms, will probably abandon it and it'll be a libertarian multicultural aspect. And that was my original point of Trump and the Hasidim and ultra-Orthodox Jews, and that Trump, as a right-winger, is coming in and saying, these Jews have a right to have our own settlements in America and live by our own law. And even like, Muslims, and because, we were socially or fiscally conservative, at least in theory, in my advertising, even if that's not factually representative. And they're just saying, okay, like this 2 years later, I'm still here. I'm still in good terms with Halsey, JF, Luke Ford, Adam Green, Dia, I just on a documentary in Australia, and she's on Adam Kokesh tonight. So, Adam Kokesh ran, libertarian presidential candidate. So my views have remained largely the same. And I think there's been minimal vindication, and that I became a representative voice for that view, but it's a tiny minority. So like relatively, that element of the alt-right that I was representing kind of in a libertarianism, fashion, is a small amount, but probably quite important. And, also like Hindus, Muslims, like the multicultural. When I first came on your show, I talked about multicultural conservatism, and I haven't really budged on it. I'm still, I became libertarian in high school. I never once changed my mind politically since that. I've always been libertarian, and that's been enough to build a small following in these debate circles. And I was mentioning to Lowell Gallen, after about getting the tech and live streaming. I would have, if I never met Luke Ford, I would have just been like Les Glassman. Olivide, but I was just someone who liked putting up interesting things and promoting my synagogue or various things that I was doing. And I didn't even think about live streaming, no live streaming. And the whole reason I even checked live streaming was largely because I wanted to hear what this Richard Spencer guy had to say, because of all the big deal they were making at University of Michigan about him coming there. I wanted to, who is this guy? What does he have to say? And, that's how I found Luke Ford. And it's, I didn't expect to be a streamer. Luke just, bought me the mic, and I like doing it, but like, I wouldn't have done it myself. And, also like Charles and Lowell, there's no chance I would have reached out to those guys and asked to be part of their things. Not my style. But I think, I stuck with my beliefs. I didn't really budge on them. I think I proved pretty loyal. I don't think there's too many streamers that could say like, I screwed them, I stabbed them in the back. even me and Luke had some trouble over the period of time. But streaming is a tough game, especially defending Jews to our fiercest critic. Like it's a pretty it's pretty tough field. And I gave the comparison to Jennifer. It's like if you interrupt a guy on the battlefield, you're likely to get hit, even if you're a friend, because on the battlefield you can't necessarily tell who's a friend or foe. And like me and Luke, Luke, who was in the blood sports and initiated Doovid into the blood sports. I'm thankful he did. But when you're in the battlefield, it's hard to be nice to people. And it's just saying that's why Israelis are always saying, that no one wants peace more than us, which could be a little bit, disingenuous. But you really can't. You have to put on a different character in the battlefield, and that's not what I got into streaming for. Like I felt the duty to defend the Jews. I was happy to be the one to do it. Oh, but I didn't get I'd rather make friends and have friendly discussions, about the things I love than constantly defending it against the people who don't like those things.
And what did your parents expect you to go in for as a career? What were the expectations that you were raised with?
What led me to being able to become a Baal Tshuva was a series of failures. And I saw Sanjay Gupta on CNN. I assume you've heard of him, right?
Yeah.
So he's from Metro Detroit, and he had been accepted into the program I was rejected into. In high school, I applied to University of Michigan. They had a special program where you basically get accepted into medical school from high school, and then you enter the program and take the pre-med classes, but it's specially trained for people, and they basically get accepted into the medical school from high school. And Sanjay Gupta from Metro Detroit had been in a program like that. So when I was in high school, like straightforward, I wanted to be a doctor. I even applied to an early admission program to be accepted into a medical program straight from high school. And I also applied to MIT. I thought I'd somehow end up being like a science. And actually, I wanted to make video games. And when I was like, if medicine, I figured I love science and math, and I love video games. So when I was a senior in high school and applied to MIT, I probably wanted to make video games. But then I got rejected from MIT. I got into U of M, but not to the early admission medical program. And then I went to Israel for the summer, and I had a life-changing experience. I found God in Jerusalem, and I became Baal Tshuva, but like not in a typical, because I think more like I found God. I didn't become Christian, like born again, but I didn't have a typical experience where I fell in with a group or a group of Jews, or I just became like a Baal Tshuva on my own through various organizations or people that helped. And after that, my parents really had no understanding or way of dealing with it. Like they wanted to help me find a profession. I have a lot of education. I was in, Turo and Stony Brook and University of Michigan. And, I have a lot of online courses. I have, close to 200 credit hours of official university education. But once I became like ultra Orthodox, it became very unlikely I was ever going to have a regular career. I think from what my parents are capable of just like Dia, saying she didn't know that much about Judaism for me to, give her an explanation about religious anti-Zionism. So even my parents' perspective in Detroit, they probably always looked at me becoming a Baal Tshuva as a mistake that was negatively going to affect my ability to get a career. And they might be right to some perspective. So, unfortunately, my parents, probably looked at me somewhat as a failure, because how they judge success and how they're trained to judge success, and the way that a religious person would judge success wouldn't be in a way that would be easily demonstratable. And maybe you had similar issues with your dad.
Yeah, how much stress did your parents put on building a career and making a good parnasa as opposed to just following your bliss?
Well, they cared more about education than a parnasa. Like, I mean, my parents are relatively, thank God, well off enough that even today they're still largely helping me out. But they did put a lot of emphasis on a college degree that meant a lot to both of my parents and my grandparents, and to be sufficient. Like if I don't spend a bunch of money, like I have an eBay business, I do property management. I've never really worked a regular job. I did a lot of things that like even were good paying or quite somewhat high level that a lot of people might not even know those jobs exist, like day trading, building permits, expediting. A lot of people probably don't even know those jobs exist. And I got those jobs almost exclusively through Orthodox Judaism. But none of those were like conventional careers that had like titles or letters, even though to some level there could be important and well-paying. And my parents understand money. So if you're doing something that's making money, yeah, I mean, it's hard to. I mean, my parents are educated people; they're smart people, but not in a way to understand and appreciate Orthodox culture. Just too distant. Even though my mother remembers her great grandfather putting on tefillin. She remembers seeing my great grandfather putting on tefillin. That's her really only connection to Orthodox. Just knowing that my great grandfather came from the Ukraine to Los Angeles and put on tefillin, remained an Orthodox Jew, even though his wife didn't. So he remained being an Orthodox Jew throughout his life, put on tefillin, kept Shabbos, maybe not 100%, and his wife didn't, and his children basically didn't get any Orthodox education. And I know people like that, who pray in synagogues, people who have, like completely fallen apart religious families, but still are Orthodox themselves. So my mother remembers that. She knows that Orthodoxy is what we are, but has absolutely no training in it. And the cultural difference that any Judaism she understands is just completely culturally distanced. In fact, I'm already a result of intermarriage and public schools that like I'm a Baal Tshuva. I could try my best to be an Orthodox Jew, but I'd say another point, like most of the Orthodox Jews I remember in Israel that were really successful, and if you really wanted to do what the rabbis in Israel wanted, you had to make your family Baal Tshuvas also. And like I was not successful in that. And it's extremely hard to do, and especially in the night dynamics that, maybe in New York or other communities. I had predicted that in Metro Detroit there would be a Baal Tshuva movement. I lived in the 5 towns in the height of the Baal Tshuva movement, where I day traded, and there were a lot of wealthy, rich, successful Jews that were becoming Orthodox. Like I was in, 20 years ago, and now, the 5 towns, the 5 towns in Long Island,
Yes.
Lawrence, Cedarhurst, Hewlett.
Yes.
So, I mean, there weren't really any Orthodox Jews there 50 years ago, and now it's almost like 30% Orthodox, and it happened over time with, Chabad and a few rabbis, and now there's, and so I was there, I worked there for a few years. I saw that, and I still think that's going to happen in Detroit, but it's not really happening in my lifetime. And, from a cultural, social perspective, like I assume most Jews, you'd have to be crazy to become a Baal Tshuva, to a certain extent. And even most Orthodox Jews, like I told, like Luke, I think he agreed with me on the assessment. Like no one ever told me it was going to be a good idea to become an Orthodox Jew. Even the Orthodox Jews who helped me out profusely and try everything possible to help me do it, still like look at me like I'm crazy for doing it.
And was an advantage of following Orthodoxy was that it kind of got you out from under the expectations of family and your upbringing? So you could go
That's
your own
possible,
path.
but no, I think I had a born again experience in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like I'm still a person and have, whatever issues that cause my cognitive dissonance and motivations. that definitely played a part. But no, I went to Israel. My parents had no clue what was going on in Israel. They still don't really. They knew what being Jewish meant, but out of my own volition, I went to Israel, and I saw things there, and I became a believer in a way that I could never go back to being who I was. And I tried my best with that. And obviously, I'm a flawed person, made a bunch of mistakes. But what I experienced in Israel, to switching from largely being an atheist as a teenager to a believer, I was not able to express and give over in a way that was understandable or believable to most of my family and friends, and which is unfortunate. But I mean, honestly, like, it's understandable to me. Like, like you're saying, if I were my childhood friends or my parents, like, I might not believe me. I mean, I don't know if you'd say that, like, from yourself. You're saying, like, if some childhood friend of yours remembered you and like, oh, you're Jewish now, it wouldn't even surprise you if you didn't. Like, no, I wouldn't even believe myself.
Yeah, yeah.
But you've seen things that, like, like, it's not like I've seen things to a level where I believe I can't go back at this point because I see and believe already.
Yeah. And were your friends growing up mostly Jewish, mostly not Jewish?
Pardon me. Mostly non-Jewish. I had a bar mitzvah, like, at a Reform place. I had a handful of Jewish friends, but somewhat. Like, my neighborhood changed most, like, from when I was a kid. It was when my parents moved to this neighborhood, it was probably like 90% white, and of the 90% white, like 20% Jewish. And then by the time I was in third grade, it was probably like 40% white, of which still like 15%, 15% of the 40%, 15% Jewish, like 30% non-Jewish white, and then African American and Chaldeans in this area, to where by the time I got to high school, it was basically an even amount of whites and Jews, both, maybe like 10%. And, so I had African American friends, I had non-Jewish white friends, I had Jewish friends, I had Indian friends. I always had I was always into diversity and had a wide array of, different friends. But, that's why when I started listening to you, and even when I met, like, eventually I spoke to Richard Spencer, even, I hadn't really thought about that, but like I do remember, like, when I was like 5 years old, when like, maybe like 90% of the people were white, but I don't have any really cognitive memories of, as a child where it wasn't, whites as a minority.
And did you notice any difference between the career expectations between the Jews and the non-Jews that you hung out with growing up?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was blatantly obvious, although it wasn't. Like, I get myself in trouble because I thought about it that way. It was to me, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go on to college and be a professional and be well-to-do because I'm Jewish. And to me, it was just sensical to, as a kid, to see it that way. A lot of Chaldeans as a youth were better off because they had family businesses in this area, party stores, mostly, some gas stations, but mostly what they call party stores. And the kids, even though they're in elementary school, worked in their stores and always had large sums of money and nice clothes. So even though, like, my parents were lawyers, these Chaldeans always had large sums of money. And African Americans had their different, like, especially as a child, I think African Americans physically develop faster. You're usually better at sports or stronger, or even you reach puberty at younger ages. And I was kind of a math and science guy, so I might have tiered, and a video game guy. So I didn't have that many friends as a kid, honestly. Like, I had some associates, like associations, but I didn't really have too many close friends as a kid. I played chess. I knew a lot of people through chess, and it was also kind of multicultural. And it's tough to say, like, okay, I played chess, but like, were any of those people really my friends, or they're just like, I was playing chess, and if I'm no longer playing chess, what does it mean to have, like, chess players as friends? I was a right personality to become born again. One thing, I had a high enough IQ, I guess, to learn the languages. Even Luke probably would have had substantial more difficulties than me if he didn't have the aptitude to pick up, Hebrew, Yiddish, to sit in front of a Talmud and other languages. So I got to Israel young enough where I was convinced that the truth laid in these Hebrew books, and put the work in to learn those languages. And relatively, I didn't have that much back in America. Like, I was basically a troubled kid who didn't have too many friends as a kid.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move on. Do you have any final words for today?
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's always fun talking, especially as COVID-19, like I got absolutely nothing going on. Thank God I got my livelihood or my immediate parents. So hopefully the streaming and hopefully this Root and Branch is going to kick off maybe even streaming next week, and hopefully we'll be able to get some guests. Maybe even Luke will do it, and it's in Jerusalem Monday and Wednesday evenings at 8:30, which is 1:30 Eastern time, and I guess would be 10:30 in the morning LA time. And they're more kind of like intellectual symposiums, which is more my level. And so I say I'm a student of Luke in that way. And I didn't even know streaming was possible. Luke's even when I just close with this, is when the Tree of Life shooting happened, and we had our big event downtown, and thank God a lot of people came and came and supported the Jewish community. And I got out of the car and I just clicked go live, and I started talking, and like Brundle was in the chat, and I was like, this must be how Luke Ford feels. And then I just went with it. So I guess with that, I appreciate that.
Okay, good to talk to you, Doovid. Take care, my friend. Okay, I want to move on to the topic. A lot of people think America's headed for a civil war or secession or some kind of geographic breakup, and I think that's insane. It's not going to happen. There are no prospects that this will happen. And Steve Saylor tackled this topic in a March 4, 2020 essay for Tacky's mag called Secession Studies. So would any kind of regional division actually cure what currently ails America during the Great Awakening? For instance, perhaps the worst cause of the recent unhappiness explosion in the United States since the Obama re-election campaign revived identity politics in 2012 is the much exacerbated war between the sexes. But how would secession solve the problem of men and women getting on each other's nerves? Nobody besides Andrea Dworkin ever thought a single-sex country would solve anything. Similarly, red and blue American states are divided less by race. California is only 36.8% white. Texas isn't far behind at just 41.5% white, than by white versus white animus. And Americans most irritated by their fellow Americans whom they encounter in real life or by those they clash with in cyberspace. So pretty much everyone I encounter in real life, I get along with just fine. If they divided up America into separate geographic countries, would Americans then cease taunting each other online? I doubt it. The truth is, it's fun. Similarly, is the threat of online censorship worse from the US government or from woke multinational corporations? If America split up, would not money continue to pour into New York and San Francisco? But then the hinterlanders couldn't even elect a Trump as revenge upon the coastal elites. Then there are the practical questions of how to divide up a huge country. What currency would successor states use? Would it be wise to give up the mighty dollar? But if not, how would the dollar be administered without a political union? The history of the euro is not encouraging. Vladimir Putin says, above all, we should acknowledge that the collapse of the Soviet Union was a major geopolitical disaster of the century. Tens of millions of our co-citizens and co-patriots found themselves outside Russian territory. The epidemic of disintegration infected Russia itself. So is the example of the collapse of the Soviet Union is really, that's something we want in the United States of America? And where exactly will we draw the border? It's hard to draw new national boundaries that would divide leftist urban centers from their own right-wing suburbs. Southern secession in 1861 was over slavery, and that led to a fairly linear border between the North and the South. The reason was because slavery was profitable at more southern latitudes where white labor was debilitated by tropical fevers. But slavery was unprofitable at more northern latitudes where blacks tended to die of respiratory infections. So 7 deep South slave states seceded soon after the election of Abraham Lincoln. 4 middle-tier slave states followed after Fort Sumter, and 4 northern slave states stayed in the Union. Today's political divides, however, are largely driven by real estate prices. Higher the real estate, the more likely people are to vote Democrat. High real estate prices are related to population density and the proximity of deep-water coastlines on the Atlantic, Pacific, and Great Lakes. Inland metro areas such as Dallas and Atlanta can expand 360 degrees into suburbs, so their home prices are lower than in cities on deep water such as San Francisco, Chicago, and New York, where suburban expansion is limited by geography. So family formation is more affordable in inland America, so traditional family values and the traditional family values party is more popular in inland America. There are exceptions to this rule. The shores of the Gulf Coast are not densely populated due to the hurricane threat, and inland Denver is turning into a deep blue city because of the high real estate prices imposed by the Rockies just west of the city. An obvious problem for secessionists of either extreme is that the blue and red map is complicated, typically being blue in cities and red in their exurbs. In purple Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Madison, these places are highly Democratic. The rest of the state is Republican. Dividing along partisan lines of geography would create an extremely complicated map, with national borders typically drawn a few dozen miles outside of civic centers, inconveniencing surrounding farmers selling their produce in the big cities and urbanites wanting to drive out to the country to fish or to golf. Millions of commuters would end up in different countries from their current jobs. Just dividing along state lines would split coastal America into 2 or more countries because the conservative Great Plains run from the Mexican border in Texas to the Canadian border in North Dakota. Whites tend to become Democrats or Republicans depending on whether they live in cities or whether they live in the country. So even if Democrats ideologically cleansed Republicans from the rural Northeast, Republicans drove out Democrats from the urban Sunbelt, their descendants who settled conquered enemy territory would start turning into the enemy. And the bigger reason here why I don't expect civil war or secession is that most people don't care that much about politics, right? Politics is not the number one driving obsession for 95% of Americans. Then there's the question of what to do with America's military assets, such as the U.S. Navy. The divvying up of the old Soviet Black Sea Fleet between Ukraine and Russia has proved enormously contentious. One example of the kind of ignominious incidents that happen when a superpower breaks up: Ukraine sold an unfinished Soviet air carrier to a shady Chinese businessman who turned it over to the Chinese Navy. Russia confiscated much of the Ukrainian fleet in 2014 when it seized the Crimea Peninsula and its main port of Sevastopol. Consider America's 11 big aircraft carriers, the foremost sword of American might. The U.S. owns 11 of the world's 24 aircraft carriers, including all 11 of the largest and 3/4 of the world's carrier planes. The United States has more than an order of magnitude more aircraft carrier-based warplanes than any other single country. 5 carriers are currently based in Norfolk, Virginia, 1 across the James River in Newport News, 1 in Bremerton on the Puget Sound, 3 in San Diego, 1 in Japan. As of the 2018 election, all 10 of the American station carriers were based in blue states, but I think an ostensibly inland America might insist upon, say, taking the Norfolk base and the San Diego base, because a Pacific port is a very good thing to own, giving it 7 aircraft carriers while leaving Newport News, Puget Sound, and Japan's base with their 4 aircraft carriers to coastal America. The notion of splitting up the U.S. along the James River was introduced by the liberal Washington Post columnist Harold Meyerson on the 150th anniversary of Gettysburg in 2013 in his column Start the Border Fence in Norfolk, Virginia. This would require breaking the states of Virginia and California into separate countries. San Diego is like Sevastopol, a Russian Navy town that was not happy being stranded in Ukraine. Similarly, San Diego, an old U.S. Navy town, is traditionally more conservative and nationalistic than the rest of coastal California. For Red America to extend a land bridge to San Diego would make it a serious two-ocean country, but it would have two downsides. First, Red America would take on an even larger border with Mexico while insulating Blue America from Latin American immigration. Second, Californians might object violently to this intrusion into their state. This could lead to war, just as the breakup of the Soviet Union led to fighting in Russian Chechnya, Transnistria, Nagorno-Karabakh, Georgia, and Ukraine. Many red Americans think that they would win in a fight. As Dave Barry wrote in 1985, the South has 96% of the nation's armed pickup trucks, whereas the North mainly has fitness centers, so it'd be over in minutes. Truth, however, the likely answer to the question of who would be willing to fight is the military servicemen who signed up to fight for the United States. So which side would the U.S. military tend to support in a battle of secession versus nationalism? My impression is the U.S. military very much enjoys representing the strongest, most ass-kicking country on earth and intends to keep the USA that way. So if the politicians can't agree on an amicable Czech-Slovak-style split-up and the obvious controversies over, say, who gets the port of San Diego suggest that they will not, then the effective decision would wind up in the hands of the hard men in the U.S. military. And my guess is military men like things just the way they are, and they have no intention of weakening America on the world stage by allowing petty politicians to split up the most awe-inspiring military in human history. So any appeal to arms puts the final decision in the hands of the warriors, and they are nationalists who value above all the unity of the nation. So, to wind things up, secession, civil war, these things are not going to happen.
Psychologist, therapist, counselor, licensed counselor, LCSW, LMFT. Today we're going to talk about all the different types of mental health professionals out there. What does it mean, and what kind of help can they offer? Makes sense as I roll through these, and I'm going to reference my notes because I actually had to do a surprising amount of research to figure this out for you. So let's get into it. The first mental health professional I want to talk about are counselors. Someone can call themselves a counselor by getting a 4-year degree from a college and then getting trained in whatever area they work in. A counselor can work in a treatment facility and be like an addiction counselor, a recovery counselor, or they can work in a school and be a school counselor. Now, a counselor such as this isn't someone who can offer a diagnosis or would put together a treatment plan for you. These are usually people that kind of guide and support you along the way and get you into the proper help that you really need. So these can often be the first person you have access to and are oftentimes free through different programs, whether it be a school or addiction treatment or anything like that. The next mental health professional I'm going to talk about are licensed professional counselors, or LPCs. That's the acronym that they'll put at the end of their name, telling you what their licensure is. Now, I had to look up a lot about licensed professional counselors because I didn't really know that much about it, and I don't have any colleagues that I interact with who have this. But from my research, it sounds like they do the exact same thing that I did. They get a 4-year degree in psychology from an undergraduate program, then they go on to get their master's, 2 years, then they gather 3,000 hours, and they call them 3,000 clinical hours, meaning I'm sitting down with a client and I'm talking or I'm doing group therapy, some kind of therapeutic hours, and then they take a licensing exam. Their licensing exam is called the National Counselor Examination, or an NCE, and then they're licensed and they can practice just like I do. As for what licensed professional counselors do and how it can feel as a client, in truth, in all the reading that I did, it sounds very similar to what a therapist does, to what I do. They can offer diagnoses, offer treatment to you, they create treatment plans, they can let you know we need a higher level of care, they can do behavioral techniques. It sounds like they pretty much do the very same thing. The only thing that I found a little different from literature about what I do is that with licensed professional counseling, they talked a lot about addiction. And so I wonder if that's something that maybe they're more specialized in or something they have more emphasis on. So I guess I'd need to do even more research to find that out, but that's really the only difference. The next mental health professional that I want to talk about is myself, a LMFT. What does that stand for, you might wonder? It's a licensed marriage and family therapist. Now, for many of you who've been watching me for a long time, you've heard this story, but what I did to become a licensed marriage and family therapist is I got a 4-year degree in psychology from Pepperdine University, and then went back to Pepperdine because I couldn't get enough, and got a master's, so 2 more years, and got my master's in clinical psychology with an emphasis on marriage and family therapy. Then I got out, I gathered 3,000 clinical hours, and then I studied to take my licensing exam, and here I am. Just, I don't know, like 12 short years later. As for what I can do as a licensed marriage and family therapist, I can diagnose and I can treat a wide variety of mental illnesses. I can put together treatment plans. I work in conjunction with hospitals and inpatient wards, and pretty much what it is you come into my office, we talk about things, I offer some tips and tricks and tools, and you utilize those in your regular everyday life, and we work through things. They like to think of an MFT as a person in relationship model, and that will kind of make more sense as we go through the next few types of mental health professionals, but I work a lot with relationships with yourself, relationships with others, and improving those. The next mental health professional that I want to talk about are licensed clinical social workers, or LCSWs, and that's the acronym that you'll see at the end of their names. Now, licensed clinical social workers have been around the longest. They were the first, that was like the first program available for people who wanted to offer up therapy. And just like I did, just like the licensed professional counselors do, they go through 4 years of undergrad education to a master's degree in clinical social.
So the best therapist I ever saw was some gay dude who was an LCSW. So I mainly saw LCSWs. I also saw someone who had a PhD in psychology, and I've also seen medical doctors who are psychiatrists. But the best of all of them, gay dude, LCSW. I'd go back to him if I needed help. So, but I've had them all, bro.
Social work. They gather 3,000 clinical hours, and they study and take their licensing exam. Now, because I have a lot of friends and colleagues who are LCSWs, I know firsthand that the testing is very similar, and we could actually study together, and we all passed. So to me, as a client, if you went in to see an LMFT or an LCSW or even an LPC, I don't really think you'd feel any different. As always, the most important component in therapy is that you actually like the therapist and you feel connected to them. You feel like you can tell them anything. And I think that is really what we need to focus on rather than what particular degree they received. Now, social workers were created out of a need, out of the hospital setting. That's really where they came from. And so they like to think of the model that they work within is person in environment. So a lot of social workers, like my friend Rocio, who's been on the channel, she goes out into the field and goes to people's houses and makes sure that they have the programs and things set up for them so they can get to and from work or group or whatever it is that they're needing in life. She makes sure that their whole environment is set up to be therapeutic and helpful for them. The next mental health professional that I want to talk about are psychologists. Now, psychologists, unlike LCSWs, LMFTs, and LPCs, have not only a 4-year undergraduate degree, but then a 4-year doctorate program. These are doctors. You call them, like Dr. Alexa Altman. She's a psychologist. She got 4 more years after her 4-year undergrad, unlike me, who did 2 years. But similar to LCSWs and LMFTs and LPCs, they also finish their 4-year doctorate program, and they gather clinical hours. They gather 3,000 clinical hours, and then they sit for their licensing exams. Now, I don't know. I haven't talked to Alexa about what the licensing exam really looks like because she took it a while ago as well, but I would guess that it is very similar. However, people who have a doctorate this is the one big.
Okay, let's see what's going on with the red bar here.
Beautiful. But in America, Jules, it's this patty. It's basically a big chicken nugget made out of fish.
I've had it many times.
I'm going to try it. I don't eat tartar sauce. Can you eat it with ketchup?
Something? I might order one tonight.
Can you eat it with ketchup? We'll eat the Mickey D's. We'll get the McDonald's as a fat person on camera in front of 30 million. It's a little thing we all go through called, am I really ready to eat McDonald's as a fat guy on camera in front of 30 million?
Thank you. It's the first time in my life I've ever passed on McDonald's for the record.
Outrageous.
You got a fillet of fish?
It's great. They're very good. They're so good. They steam the bun. No.
This is something. Look at the bag next to Tim Dillon. And by the way, in that bag, it's just fries, nuggets, burgers. And I love Tim Dillon, and Tim Dillon wants to love Rogan, and it's mutually beneficial for them, but they really don't get each other. They don't mesh. They don't click. So there's no camaraderie there. It doesn't feel safe when Tim's in the room to Joe. And Joe knows that talking to Kyle Kowinski is a huge D- of a convo. And when you're sitting on election night, an event, and you got Kyle Kowinski, and then, Tim Dillon's here, that's good, I guess, but we don't really click. So I'm all alone here. And Joe's all alone. He starts snapping at Jamie. He's taking it out on Jamie. Yelling at him. They're all fact-checking him. He's turning into Jason. Let's see what happens.
Fox News.
California Department of Public Health. It's a quote from the California Department of Public Health. Just Google it, you fuck, and don't interrupt Kyle anymore.
I did ask him that time. I said that sounded fake. You got to look that up.
I mean, circulating on Facebook says this is not accurate.
Fuck Snopes.
Okay.
Joe did a lot of blunders. There was another Wyoming blunder that somebody brought up that I caught too.
I know, I was looking for that one, but I couldn't find it this morning.
Joe would do stuff. Joe, every year that goes by, it completely resets to what Joe knows. Again, Joe should be well-versed in how elections work and presidents and averages and what used to happen. He's looking at the map. He goes, Wyoming went red? Well, that never happens. And then they went, ha ha ha, good one, Joe. And he went, ha ha, yeah. And then pretended as if he was joking all along. When in reality, he was making a huge mess up, and he slickly got out of it by pretending he was kidding because it was such a blatant thing. I mean, he's really getting stupid.
Everybody's ripped California governor's news. It's got to be.
Yeah, that they couldn't.
Coronavirus.
Yeah, the audio, yeah.
Gavin Newsom's Thanksgiving rules. Click on that.
That's Daily Mail, though.
These are not
But they are saying what I want to hear. Do you not understand how this works?
This is like an experiment in, ideological confirmation bias.
What I want to hear.
You get anything else from McDonald's besides the fish?
I got a meal.
That has fries?
Yeah.
And a Coke?
Yeah.
You didn't get me a hamburger to wash that all down?
I'm sorry.
Why don't you get back on the phone with them?
I can't. It's too late. It's already on the way.
It's never too late.
The second I
he was
clicked
joking
order, I was like, why
all
did I get
along.
two? But it was too late.
Always, when I like to wash down whatever I'm trying with a burger. So if I don't like it, I take a chaser of a burger.
You have to use
imagine,
water.
so you imagine, get me a burger from somewhere, a good one. I'm kidding. I'm not going to make you do it. But imagine how happy they would be if they got to see me eat a burger as well. Fish and a burger, because I'm not eating a fry in front of them. That's embarrassing. Deep throating a fry.
Okay, that didn't really work. Sorry, not good value for money
One
there.
participant in World War II. They had Hugo Boss design their uniforms. Why did they have Hugo Boss design their uniforms? They're fighting the whole world. The whole world. Trying to take over all of Europe. Why have Hugo Boss design your uniforms? Why do you care? Because it matters how you look. Why did both sides of World War II bother making propaganda films? Because it matters. The visual medium is so powerful A picture is worth 1,000 words. And what is a film but lots of pictures, right? Frames per second. It's the most powerful medium in politics. So it matters a great deal how you look. And a lot of thought must go into how you look. Thought, preparation, planning. That was absent here. They didn't coordinate their outfits.
What about... You're really talking while you're eating dinner? Come on, man. Yeah, I mean, I've done that. But how do you talk about optics while you're stuffing your face?
They didn't pick out nice outfits. They didn't coordinate the stage. They didn't plan, with a right auditorium that would fit their crowd in there. They didn't plan to keep these people out. They didn't have a plan in case they did have an audience full of hostiles. They didn't think about it. They didn't give a shit. They half-assed it, and it shows. And we have to work harder than the opposition because the opposition has money. If the opposition fails, they have unlimited chances. If Charlie Kirk fails, does it matter? Think about like Milo. Milo's a great example. Milo, when he got kicked off of, he was supposed to be the keynote speaker at CPAC in 2017. And they kicked him off because of that tape that came out where he was talking about like pederasty, basically. After that, he got $15 million from the Mercer family. As far as I know, to my knowledge, I haven't discussed this with him. But to my knowledge, because this is what was reported at the time, he and $14 to $15 million after this. To do his free speech week at Berkeley and to relaunch his tour and everything and to get his book self-published and all that. Okay? So and Milo's really not the system, but people that are in the system get unlimited opportunities to fuck up. That's the point. The point is, if you say the right things and you have the right backers, you get an unlimited amount of chances. You get a get-out-of-jail-free card every time. If Charlie Kirk implodes, like he did in Turning Point Culture War, Turning Point made $30 million in revenue this year. That was after we humiliated them in the Groyper Wars. They can fuck up every day, and there's still money, and there's still backers because they are pushing what the system wants them to. They work for the system. We do not have that luxury. Our resources are scarce. Our backers are few. The opportunities we have to change people's minds, we don't have a lot of them. And you only get one chance to make a first impression. And we're up against the mainstream media, social media. We're up against gatekeepers on the right, antagonists on the left. We don't have the luxury of fucking up. That's what these people don't understand. These guys go out there on a naked stage and they say, this is good enough. Who gives a shit? Who cares? Let's just walk out there. Let's just roll up to the thing and just walk out there. I don't know, Mike. Wear your jeans. I'll wear this three-piece suit. Who cares? And then I get on their case for having a bad look, and people say, oh, you're superficial. Oh, our race is dying and you care about optics. Yeah, because we only have one shot at this. And this is an information war. It's a media war. It's about perception. And if you want to be a master of politics, you have to be a master of perception. You have to be a master of media. You have to care about this. People, and look at this. Look at the contrast. Look at where people take this for granted, but look, they've got stools. No stools. No stools, no podium, no chair, no couch, no nothing. Nothing. No preparation, no forethought. Here, they've got stools. They've got water bottles in case they get thirsty, in case their mouths get dry. They put the stools in a place where you could see them. They set them up. They have a program. We're going to walk out here. We're going to sit there. I'll walk out first. Then I'll introduce you. You come out. Then we talk. Then we leave. What's the program here? I'm going to walk out. I guess you guys stand behind me somewhere. I'll walk out. I'll walk around a little bit. I'll give my speech. And then you guys can kind of come in and out and maybe just hang out in the back. There's no plan. Here, there's a plan. Okay, we'll sit down. We'll do an interview. What the fuck is this? You guys will just be the fat retards in the back and I'll be the lead?
Fuentes is making some good points.
Okay, they've got a giant banner, Turning Point USA. What organization are they with? Turning Point USA. What's the brand? Culture War, Charlie Kirk. They have a big-ass banner. That probably cost a lot of money. They had to pay a graphics designer to design it. They had to pay a printer to print it. They had to deliver it the day of and set it up in the morning before the event. Forethought, planning, organization, coordination, logistics. It's all there. It's all there for this. They have their watermark here. They have their own cameras streaming the event. Turning Point brings their own camera crew to film it, to stream it, so they have an HD recording. They have a stream going out live, and it's reliable with good audio and good video, so they can capture this that they put a lot of money into doing. It looks good, and look at their outfits. Now, I mean, this isn't a great outfit, but it fits. The jeans fit, the suit fits. He's wearing something similar. They both look professional compared to these guys. I'm going to come out in a three-piece suit. You're going to be the fat guy in the baggy jeans. You're going to wear your fash cut and the shoes from Boston Ross, and we're going to be on a naked stage with nothing with our 12 supporters. And it's just, and there's Patrick, of course, with the question. But that's how the optics war started. And I said, this is bad optics. It should look like this. Now, that doesn't mean, now keep in mind, it's got nothing to do with the message. I hate the message of Charlie Kirk. But the look is what they've got figured out. And they get paid the big bucks because they know the look. They get paid the big bucks because they can take the free market, and everybody's done free market, but they do it with the stage, with the right lights and the right backdrop, and it looks good, and they've got logistical support. They've got people they can call. They know how to do this stuff and do it well. They're prepared. They've done it before. They've got experience. That's why they make the big bucks, because this stuff is effective. Why do you think people pay millions of dollars for this? They pay millions of dollars for this because this works. This high production quality stuff works. I can send this to somebody and it's not offensive to the eyes. I can send somebody this and people are going to want to look at this because it's easy to look at and it makes sense. I can't send somebody, who even filmed this? Nobody knows. You know who filmed this? A news crew. A news crew has the only footage of this event. Spencer didn't have his own guys stream it. He didn't have his own guys record it. The only recording has shitty audio. They're not mic'd up. It's the audio in the auditorium. And the news crew which shot this in the back of the room, which they don't even own. and it wasn't streamed, and it wasn't recorded for them. And look, and this is the most important thing. It doesn't matter if you could love Richard Spencer, be a diehard supporter, you agree with everything he says, and you hate me. You hate me. You think I'm a bad guy. You think I'm a cat boy, whatever. You know, that I'm Mexican, whatever. You know, you think I'm a optics cock. But that doesn't matter, because what I'm saying is true regardless. It has nothing to do with the substance or the rhetoric or any of that. It is just about preparation. It's about taking yourself seriously. It's about knowing what it takes to succeed in this stuff. It's about knowing just the basic fundamentals. Like, think about Trump. Trump is another perfect example. Let's go to Trump's announcement speech in 2015. This is from C-SPAN. Okay, now take a look at this. Trump is a master of this kind of stuff. Trump actually says in this inauguration speech, in this announcement speech, the first thing he says is you go to these other events with other candidates, you know, when they do rallies, when the other primary candidates were doing their rallies. He said, you go to these other events and it's too hot where they're doing them and they're sweating like dogs. These people can't run the country. And he's making, and I like, think about that. Do people just, it goes in one ear out the other? Think about that. Why did he say that? Who says that? That was a huge revelation to me. It's a big deal. Logistics are a big deal. And he said, look, if Marco Rubio can't book a space where it's the right amount of people and it's a good quality stream and good audio and the temperature's right, how's he going to run the country? If you can't put together a team and prepare a simple event, how can you change a country? You can't. And Trump had this in Trump Tower, perfectly choreographed. Gets on the golden elevator in the beautiful atrium with the marble and the gold escalator, and he comes down impeccably dressed with his wife. And look at the set. Look at the set. Trump, make America great again. It's beautiful. Blue curtain, American flags, podium, the place is packed. Now, at the time, I don't know if you remember this, when Trump announced, there were rumors that Trump had paid people to go to this thing. This was in July 16, 15. When he announced, in all the news agencies, they were saying that Trump had put out an ad for people to attend his announcement speech. He paid them to be there. Didn't matter. Didn't matter if he paid them, if they're there organically. He had people in the atrium and on the mezzanine in the beautiful marble atrium of Trump Tower with the blue curtain and the flags, the podium with the name on it. Beautiful podium, beautiful poster right there. Film crew all in back. He's impeccably dressed. He's got his beautiful daughter there, his beautiful wife there. It works. It works. It's beautiful. It's a good look. This makes sense. This is good optics. This makes sense. This is good optics. This is shit. This is bad optics. This is garbage. And no matter what your message is, if Spencer had the message of Kirk or Spencer had the message of Trump, but he looked like this, it would still be shit, regardless of the message. And I think you get that. But that's how the optics war started. Because I said, even at the time, I said, you got Fat Mike Enoch, Fat Eli Mosley hanging out in the back. They don't know what to do with themselves. The dress isn't coordinated. Everything I just told you. I said, I don't think it was a good look. And it doesn't convince people that they should trust us. That doesn't communicate to people that we're confident, that we know what we're talking about, that they should take a leap of faith and join our movement. It doesn't project strength. It doesn't project this momentum of an ascending political force. It communicates. What does this communicate? Just think to yourself. The opposite. So that's how it started. My food's getting cold because I'm
Okay. All right, let's look at OutsideTheBeltway.com. Police were warned about the Nashville bomber 16 months ago. In hindsight, there were more than a few clues. According to the Daily Beast, this guy was known as someone who disliked authority, loved smoking weed, and claimed he'd just gotten out of the Navy. He was arrested for marijuana possession in 1978. He used to talk about how much I hate cops. They're all corrupt. Never trust a cop. His girlfriend, 16 months before the explosion, warned Nashville police that Anthony Warner was building a bomb. So she's experiencing a mental health crisis. She calls the police, tells them that her boyfriend is talking about bombs and that he knows how to make a bomb. Police go to investigate. Warner, who does not like police, denies them permission to search his premises without a warrant. Lacking any evidence aside from a crazy woman's vague testimony about something about he likes to make bombs, they declined to pursue a warrant that they probably would have been denied. They checked with federal authorities. They were told that his record was clean. So perhaps it's not obvious that a ball was dropped here. In hindsight, knowing that Warner set off a bomb, we would like police to have done more with that tip that he might set off a bomb. But based on what they knew at the time, that a woman making a mental health distress call said he talked about bombs a lot, it's not obvious what more they should have done. And also on Outside the Beltway, Insecurity-in-Chief, Trump brags about being the most admired and provides yet another example of poor understanding of data. So Donald Trump tweets that in a 2020 poll, he came in first as the most admired American. and he got 18% of the vote. Barack Obama was second with 15%, Biden third with 6%, and Fauci fourth at 5%. According to Trump, this is a sign that Trump really won the election. Trump tweets, "This is rather odd given the fact that on November 3rd, Biden allegedly racked up more millions of votes than Trump, but can't get anywhere close to him in this poll. No incoming president has ever done as badly in this annual survey. That's because he got millions of fake votes in the 2020 election, which was rigged." So many thoughts immediately occur to one. The most overwhelming one is it never fully ceases to amaze what a remarkably insecure and narcissistic president we have. Same way a dead skunk stench never ceases to offend, even if it is not surprising how bad it smells. And then the second thought is how absurd it is to think that this survey has anything to do with electoral outcomes. And it's another example of innumeracy by Trump and those who believe that this is important. So on the general math issue, if 18% of the country think you're the most admirable, 82% of the country think you aren't. And in response to the polling, first, an open-ended question like, this means you're going to get so many answers that by definition, the winner is still only going to be a small plurality. Second, a question like, what man that you have heard or read about living today in any part of the world you admire most is going to largely result in name recognition. So the incumbent president is usually top of mind when Gallup asks Americans to name without prompting which man living anywhere in the world they admire most. In the 74 times Gallup has asked the open-ended most admired man question since 1946, the incumbent president has topped the list 60 times. 3 of the 14 times that a president did not top the list were, guess what? 2017, 2018, 2019, when Barack Obama topped Donald Trump. So Obama topped the list 12 years running. So Trump's inability to win up and until now is a function of his lack of popularity, which we have seen measured his entire presidency. There's nothing surprising about the 2018 midterms or the 2020 presidential election. Trump has consistently had historically low job approval ratings in the neighborhood of about 42%. The poll is mostly an end-of-the-year filler story during a time period when American news organizations are mainly taking the time off. It doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot, but this is what Donald Trump is pinning on top of his Twitter feed.
Well, see, I think President Trump should stand at the top because he has been an incredible president. He has, though, Marie. He is someone who led one of the strongest economies we saw pre-COVID. This is a man who has gotten more Middle East peace deals done in just one term alone. He's gotten more than half of all the peace deals we have seen in our nation's history done in one term. This is someone who got Mexico to step up to the plate on things like illegal immigration. This is someone who's brought a business approach to Washington, D.C., therefore solving problems when people like Joe Biden, who have been there forever, created the mess that President Trump went to go fix. And I also think it's remarkable because you have a media who has vilified him, demonized him, lied about him, and yet he still sits atop the throne. And Marie, I love you, but this must be a hard segment to leave. Well, see, I think President Trump should stand.
Okay, what do we got here? Does online therapy really work?
First, let's talk about online therapy and what we can do to maximize it. Creating a safe space to have therapy is key. If we worry that someone is listening in on us, we won't be able to open up and benefit from therapy as much. I've had many patients and viewers tell me that they're doing therapy in their car or at the park that's a block away, or that they set up a comfy place in their closet. I know that sounds silly, but with blankets hanging around them to deaden the sound. Whatever you can do to create that safe space, go for it. Next, setting up a ritual around your online therapy. We used to have a ritual, whether we knew it or not, like driving to our appointment. Maybe we got coffee or water, wait in the waiting room for a bit, and then going in. Let's create one while we're at home. Maybe that means we prepare a water bottle or our tea or get our safe space ready. Maybe we put on comfy clothes or get dressed up like we did before lockdown, and then we head to our appointment, even if it's just in our closet. And having that ritual will help us adjust to online therapy more quickly and get our brain and body ready for it too. Finally, talk about the awkwardness with your therapist. It's okay to give them feedback about their online tactics or tell them you don't like it or it feels really odd. Having a safe space to talk about all that's going on in our minds is what therapy is all about. So take advantage of it. Okay, now on to how we can use some self-help tools and techniques on our own with or without the help of a therapist. And first up is finding a workbook that's specific to what you want to work on. Is anger an issue? Anxiety? Maybe we have some trauma in our past or are struggling with an eating disorder. I have an Amazon store that I will link in the description so you can see some of the workbooks that I like. But obviously, feel free to do your own research. Ask friends and read reviews about different books and workbooks until you find one that sounds good to you. Then, and most importantly, set a time each and every day or every other day to work on it. I usually tell my patients to give themselves 20 to 30 minutes and then move on to something else. I don't want this work to become so burdensome that it's hard to do it regularly. It's more important that we do it on a regular schedule rather than cramming it into 4 hours or something like that. Then I want you to have time to digest all you're reading and working on. I don't want you feeling like you have to rush through it. My next tip for at-home mental health care is to find or engage a support system. This could be your friends and family, or it could be friends you've made online. We need to have a safe space to talk about what we're working on, vent when we need to, and maybe get some insight and advice. Having other people